Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there and good evening. Welcome to the show. Alex Phillips here, sitting in for... Who am I sitting in for? Is it Jeremy? Is it Peter? I don't know. I'm just sitting in the driving seat for Drive, basically, and very, very happy to have your company. Thank you ever so much for tuning in. I'm going to be with you for the next 3 hours. And you know what? Let's make a little promise to each other. Should we try and have some fun? I know it's really difficult. I was looking through the newspapers this morning going, oh, God, it's like the same old misery. Rinse and repeat, moan, 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 which we all love doing. I do love a good old moan. But I kind of figured, that's all very well. I also like to laugh a bit. So let's try and do that on the show today, somehow, together. You're a funny lot. I know you. Some of your messages are absolutely golden. And even more, the creativity you put into some of your voice notes is hard to match, quite frankly, mainly because most people in comedy are on the left, aren't they? Which makes them, well, just instantly unfunny. But you lot, you guys, you have got wit in your wisdom. So leave me some fun voice notes today, would ya? The number to call if you want to get in touch with the programme and talk about whatever we're talking about today, or you can propose a new topic if you so wish. You might not get to talk about it. Jodie is going to rule the joint with an iron fist, and she will decide if you're sensible enough to put on air. The number is 03444991000. It's your normal network rate. So basically, it don't cost you anything. That's also the number to send me a WhatsApp message, or indeed to leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number if you'd like to send me a text message. If you're going to do that, you gotta write the word talk before you write out your message, because my understanding is if you don't do that, it sort of creeps around the various corridors of power and the multiple floors in Talk Towers trying to find its owner, and could end up in completely the wrong kennel. If you want to interact with us on X, we're at talkTV. Okay. Let's get into the news today. And you know Rachel Reeves, right? She doesn't seem to be able to add up very well, does she? Because first of all, she comes into power and goes, £22 billion black hole here that the Conservatives have left. And they're like, no, we didn't. And even the Financial Times sent a Freedom of Information to the Treasury going, can you show us your workings? Not so much. And then after a year in power, that black hole just keeps getting bigger. And that's, but she said to us, don't you worry, we're only going to increase, you know, the taxes. It's going to be a punishing first budget, but after that, it's all going to be the sunlit uplands because I'm a brilliant chancellor. And all of a sudden, it's like, yeah, I didn't work, did it? You can't add up, can you? Because you threw a load of cash money at Ed Miliband and his crazy Win1 projects. You threw a load of cash money at doctors when they demanded higher salaries. You threw a load of cash money at a load of things, didn't you? And you suddenly realised you didn't have any money to cover it. And so here we go. But, by the way, it's not because actually she can't add up that she needs to go back onto BBC Bite Size and retake GCSE maths. No, not Rachel from accounts. She's a Bank of England economist, remember? No, it's because she is a woman. She's a woman. That's why. And it's not that she's rubbish at maths because she's a woman, but the reason people say she's rubbish at maths is because she's a woman. I mean, even Carol Vorderman, right, is probably wading into that one right now. Let's speak to the brilliant Benedict Spence, who is a Conservative commentator. Hi, Benedict. Rachel Reeves, I mean, she's blighted by her genitalia, isn't she? Poor thing. No wonder she's having such a hard time in number 11. If she was only a man, those sums would make more sense.
Everybody knows that having male genitalia allows you to count more easily. This is something that you were taught in primary school from an early age, depending on what kind of school you went to. Honestly, this whole thing is, frankly, I think pretty insulting to the average British voter who can sit there, see themselves getting poorer, feel themselves getting poorer, and to then, when the Chancellor is questioned by anybody at all as to her policies, decides to fall back on this frankly pretty tired attack line of going, oh, well, it's only because I'm a woman. Right now, the Labour Party are the only ones talking about the sex of Rachel Reeves. When they entered office, they couldn't stop talking about how great it was that we had a female chancellor. And now that said female chancellor is being questioned, they go, well, you shouldn't be able to question her because she's a woman, and this is not allowed. Honestly, I think it's incredibly insulting to a lot of voters who are about to get a heck of a lot poorer.
Didn't she have a bit of a meltdown because apparently in her office attached to it is a bathroom which has been there for a very long time, ever since the days that Winston Churchill was the Chancellor, and apparently it's got a urinal in there, and she was like, I don't want the urinal in there, it's got to be removed, it's triggering me, and people are like, well, we don't want to remove it because it's kind of an important historical artefact. You know, this is a urinal that has been weed in by one of the greatest leaders of all time. No, got to get rid of Winston Churchill's urinal. And the way she paraded around going, I'm the first female chancellor, it's like, oh my goodness, you do know we've had 3 female prime ministers at this point. We've had a queen, for crying out loud. It's just, I hate it. It doesn't do anyone any favours. It doesn't exactly ring as a shining endorsement for womanity when she is our sort of role model, does it? Let's talk about the BBC, because the whole we're not biased, we're not institutionally biased, yes we are, no we're not, nothing to see here. I mean, they are. They are. I was listening to the BBC today, I don't know why, and they just had a field day over this Guardian story that was actually in the print media a few days ago. Was it over the weekend or something? And the BBC are running it as a top story because they finally stuck a microphone under Nigel Farage's nose and said, so are you a racist? Did you say mean things in the playground? And it's like, who cares? Like, seriously, who cares?
I mean, on the subject of the Nigel Farage story, I mean, look, anybody with half a brain cell to rub together knows that teenage boys are oiks. They have always been, they will always be. They look to push the boundaries of acceptable speech. They are encouraged, in fact, to push boundaries. They are encouraged, once they have found a taboo, to stress test that taboo. They find every and all weaknesses in their peers when they are at school to rib each other. And most boys take those ribbings and use them and create a sense of, suit of armor. They use them as part of their character. It is, I'm afraid to say, I know lots of people hate this idea, but it is character forming. And it does not actually reflect the men that they become. We used to understand this, that actually boys would be boys. That doesn't mean that you can let them get away with criminality or anything like that. But at that age, they are not reflective of the adults they later become. If we're genuinely going to be going back to a time when people are at school, not even old enough to have done his GCSEs, Nigel Farage at this time, and say, what you did there is a direct reflection of who you are today.
It's also basically one guy who seems to have an extra long memory when it comes to verbatim words that came out of Farage's mouth. He was some sort of LGBTQ+++ theatre director in London. One assumes probably not a Reform voter. And his magic memory seems to be able to record incidents from 50 years ago. Gosh, we should have him working in GCHQ. He's wasted in theatre land. And on account of him saying, oh, yes, he said racist stuff, The Guardian's done a big article, the BBC are waxing lyrical over it. Anyway, so I thought I would do my own little BBC partiality test. And I thought of all the things that other political bigwigs have said and how the BBC have covered them. So I played the Google game of putting as my search terms BBC plus name of politician plus scandal to look at the headline. So first of all, I did BBC, Sir Keir Starmer, Czechoslovakia, because it was in the press that and there's receipts, you can see the documents there, that Sir Keir Starmer during the Cold War saw it fit to go on the other side of the Iron Curtain and go and work essentially for the USSR. I mean, weird not? He's now our Prime Minister. So I thought, right, how did the BBC cover that? Yeah, they didn't. So then I thought, oh, everyone's talking about Wes Streeting could be the next Prime Minister. Wes Streeting put a string of social media posts up there talking about wanting to throw people under buses. So I put BBC, Wes Streeting, Jamur. I wonder how the BBC reported on this. Oh, that's right. They didn't. And then I thought to myself, they're platforming this Zach Polanski a lot at the moment. I mean, you can't get him off the telly box, can you? So I thought, I wonder how the BBC covered the story of Zach Polanski exploiting vulnerable women by charging them to go to a session where he said, by the power of his own brain, he could hypnotise them into having a bigger breast size. I mean, that's weird, right? That's worth a mention. How did the BBC report on that? They didn't. I mean, this is the problem. And so then I looked how many times the BBC, I put BBC, Nigel Farage, racist. That's it. There was like 80 pages of a whole myriad headlines you could choose between that the BBC have gone wild about. I even said to Grok, can you do me analysis of sentiment bias in the BBC's reportage of politics by comparing headlines about Nigel Farage to headlines about Sir Keir Starmer, right? And you know, don't take my word for it. Let's read this out. Of 20 Starmer headlines from this year, 50% had a negative tone, which was internal Labour strife or external criticism. The neutral was also 50%, or neutral positive 50% of headlines. So you got a 50-50 reportage there. Nigel Farage, negative tone, 80%, criticism, racism, allegations about bad doing. Neutral tone, 20%, positive, 0. Well, there you go. You're biased, BBC.
I think ultimately, I mean, to go back to the Starmer example, I mean, that is a particularly egregious one, because anybody who does sort of know anything about the time in question would know that Keir Starmer was, you know, a committed communist in his youth. You don't go to Cold War era Czechoslovakia to go and, you know, work on memorials and stuff with the authorities unless you know what you're getting into. He was no sort of naive individual, Keir Starmer. Say what you like about him, he's not stupid. He knew exactly what it was that he was doing at the time. And I think the way, you're right, the way that that part of his past has just been completely ignored, whereas the childish playground taunts of Nigel Farage, which, you know, whether he said them, whether he didn't, is slightly beside the point. I'll go back to saying what I said at the start. You shouldn't be holding children to this kind of a standard, because if you held every single person to the standard by which they'd behaved when they were children, absolutely nobody would be allowed to be in public life. And as much as, you know, in response to this story, we've had all sorts of very holier-than-thou people saying, oh, well, it's disgraceful and he should own up and this was never acceptable. We're all kind of sat there going, no, come on. If you're honest, we all remember what it is like to be a child. Children are, you know, all sorts of words that I can say about what children are, but you know what? There is a reason why we do not hold them to the same standards as adults. They mess around, they say things that they don't mean for effect, to get attention, to get rises out of people, to bully people, to stress test taboos, all the rest of it. And as a society, as adults, you ought to be able to recognize, those are children. They're not the same as adults, and adults' opinions and behaviours can change over time.
But 50 years ago it was a different world as well. This is the thing, 50 years ago, humour was totally different. I mean, just ask David Lammy, his favourite, his role model, apparently, he said recently, is Bill Cosby. It's like, oh my God, here comes Brains of Britain again. What a ridiculous answer.
Do you know what, though? Lots of people have tried to say that, oh, it was a different era, it was more acceptable back then. I still don't buy that as a line, actually, because people are saying, genuinely, oh, it would never happen today. It absolutely happens today. If you think your children, who have access through their phones to every kind of violent content and violent pornography and, you know, all sorts of extreme stuff on the internet that children in the 70s never had access to, the amount of anti-Semitism, for instance, that you'll find on TikTok or Instagram or stuff like that, if you really think your children today are not saying extraordinarily offensive things to their peers to get reactions out of them, you are naive.
Well, the hilarious thing is, actually, you know, allegedly, some of the worst stuff that Nigel Farage said was anti-Semitic. I mean, it'd probably be in fashion if you're saying it in the playground today. That's what's so blimmin' alarming. Let's go back to the budget, because it seems to me that Rachel Reeves, they've been, you know, testing, haven't they, via the media, all the potential policies to see how backbenchers are going to respond, how the media respond, how opposition political parties might respond. And so it kind of looks like a fudge, a sort of like, you know, a smorgasbord of sin taxes, really. The sugar tax, the milkshake tax is now going to be added to the sin taxes, more tax on alcohol. It's that sort of horrible thing where it's like, well, I'm taxing you Not because I can't add up. I'm doing it for your own good. That's exactly how the left wing always operate. So if you were going to invent a syntax, Mr. Spence, what would you put it on?
Oh, I wish I'd had a bit more time to prepare on this. Honestly, there's all sorts of things that I would probably tax. I don't know, Marmite, I'd probably tax that. I don't like the idea of matcha. So why on earth do people drink matcha? It's disgusting. We should be taxing that. I wouldn't tax avocados, though. Just to rub this in the boomers' fate, I'd actually take some of their pension risers and I'd use it to subsidise avocados, just to be irritating. But that's because I shouldn't be trusted as a politician. I would do things just for the japes. But honestly, I think that those would be two pretty good taxes. What else? What else can we think of?
Oh, do you know what? You could tax fringe lengths, couldn't you? So you've got to have, you know, Claudia Winkleman doesn't pay a fringe tax, but anything that starts going above the eyebrows is suddenly, you know, per millimetre worth like £1,000 a year. Then all the extreme leftists with their socialist workers placards, bam!
I tell you what, that would be a very socialist kind of policy. Isn't it North Korea, where you're only allowed 3 different types of haircuts and the authorities are allowed to measure them? So actually we could do that. If you're sort of half an inch over your standard Rachel Reeves, ooh, that's going to be a 25 quid fine and maybe a couple of days in prison. I think that could be quite amusing, actually.
I mean, I was saying to Ian Collins earlier, I would tax the mention of either fascist, Nazi or Hitler. Because it's getting ridiculous. It's getting boring now. It's like, God, guess what? Oh, someone else is comparing someone on the right wing to Hitler.
You'd bankrupt so many news outlets so quickly. So many left-wing columnists would they'd be let go straight away by their papers saying, listen, we've had a great ride, but we can't afford you anymore because of the amount of fines that we're going to get. So please stop saying that. I think it would be a very worthwhile idea, actually, to, at the very least, try and educate people on what fascism is. But actually, if necessary, yes. If you had to pay a quid every time you said the word Nazi, fascist or Hitler, actually, we could solve the deficit pretty quickly just from The Guardian.
Now, there you go. I know. Wouldn't it be a brilliant way of harvesting all of the money and redistributing it, which is what socialists love to do, back to the people who need it most, who probably live in the Red Wall. Do you know, if you're listening and you're sort of discussing amongst yourselves what you would have as a syntax, then, well, sharing is caring, is it not? We want to hear from you, preferably via the medium of a voice note, OK? Because then we might be able to even make some sort of montage, if you will, a sort of Jive Bunny mega mix of your brilliant proposals. So if you'd like to do that, the number is 0344 499 1000. Leave me a voice note. Let me know if you were Chancellor for the day. What would your fantasy tax be? You can also send that in a text message, of course, 87222. All right, thank you ever so much. Now, before we let Mr. Spence go back and continue with his evening, given that he might have gone already, I don't know if he's still in circulation. No, he's still there, thank goodness. There has been a glimmer of common sense. Nice tash, by the way. I was just looking to see if you're still online, and I caught a glimpse of your fizzog. You're looking esteemed.
Looking like a bomber command figure, yes.
No, you're either looking like somebody who made a lot of money in drugs in the 1970s or in the adult film industry. I'm not sure which.
Why not both?
Or both, actually, yes, probably interconnected professions. Now, a glimmer of common sense on the horizon here. The Blimmin' Motability Scheme, which I think is one of the most ludicrous things to exist in the United Kingdom. 1 in 5 cars, 1 in 5 cars on the road are being given to someone for a supposed disability. And we ain't talking about robbing Reliance, are we? Well, apparently someone's decided that, well, that's not fair. And so the way to tackle this is you can't have a fancy car anymore, i.e. you're not allowed a Mercedes or a BMW. They've been removed from the scheme. Anything else, go for it. Hurrah. Hadn't had a poo in 3 days? Here's a car.
What a mental image that is right there. I had no idea you could get something for that.
Oh, no, constipation was one of the reasons someone claimed for a Motability car.
Oh, come on, really?
Like, seriously, diarrhea I could understand more. It's like, oh, got to get somewhere quickly. Constipation, you've got all the time in the world. A bit of walking might help.
I have to be honest here, actually. I think a brand new BMW is the last thing somebody with terminal diarrhea needs, frankly. I think that that's a catastrophic idea, but, each to their own. This whole scheme has been a farce since the start. There are very many people in this country who do need assistance from the state. Let's just get that out of the way. We're all aware of this. And for some of them, yes, actually, mobility is an important part of that. But the sheer scale of this scheme, the lengths to which it has gone, and the way that it's exploded since the pandemic, it's very clearly a bit of a racket going on. And I think that this is just the start of the rolling back. We can't stop here and go, oh, well, it's fine now. Nobody's getting their brand new German cars, so everything's fine and there's nothing else to see here. Because that's exactly the sort of thing a lot of Labour MPs, I suspect, would like to be the case, because they don't want to upset these people, because a lot of them are their constituents. We cannot stop there. It's a good start. But of course, as you said, it's a little bit of common sense. Let's juxtapose that against the idea and the news today that maybe we're scrapping jury trials. So even when the government does something sort of right, they then go and machine gun everything else. So
well, thank you for teeing up a future topic there, Mr. Spence. And no doubt the reason that German cars have been removed from the Motability scheme is probably because they're Nazi. Thank you ever so much, Ben. I'll speak to you soon. Let's read some of your messages. And I want your thoughts, like I said, on what would be your sort of fantasy sin tax. If you could tax something, and like I said, don't be serious here. Don't be like, if I were like as a Keynesian economist. No, if that's you, put your phone down. We need to have a bit of a laugh, don't we? So let me know. 03444991000 is the number to send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp, 8722 to text some of your messages before we go to break. Alex, has someone stolen the sleeves from your top? Did Rachel from accounts tax it? I mean, look, I'm missing sleeves. I'm missing a bit here. I look like I've been eaten by a pack of dogs. Alex, I have a great idea. Why don't we tax the lies that come from Stalin and his motley crew? Problem solved. Yeah, wouldn't that be good? They all seem to have 1,000 houses, don't they? Afternoon, can we all pitch in for an abacus and a box of man-sized tissues ready to be delivered to the Commons for Rachel? She can't work a calculator. Too true. But Kevin in Southampton doesn't mind all my missing parts. He says, my outfit looks fantastic today. So thank you ever so much, Kevin. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere, because coming up, we're going to be talking about whether peace can be achieved in Ukraine.
Google Play.
People smugglers are handing out a cheat manual to migrants on how to lie to claim asylum in the UK. It sets out a step-by-step guide in Arabic on how to pretend to be from the persecuted Bedouin minority, a stateless tribe from Kuwait.
How many Muslim asylum seekers do you ever see seeking asylum in a Muslim country?
Yeah.
It's always baffled me that all these Muslims want to come to a Christian country.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, apparently there's potential good news on the horizon, which is that Ukraine has agreed to a peace proposal with only minor details. But really, is this going to get anywhere? Let's speak now to Rear Admiral Chris Parry. Chris, the first thing we saw was essentially a Kremlin-written peace treaty, which was put in front of Zelensky, who basically went, no chance, as did the coalition of the willing. Now it seems that the US have drafted something and put it in front of Ukraine and have said, oh, yeah, great, that seems reasonable enough, but what's the betting? It goes to the Kremlin and they poo-poo it.
Well, Alex, none of us have seen what the terms are yet, so we don't even know whether it's a sensible suggestion. At the moment, I think there's a lot of heat and noise going on, and I think the final settlement will look even different to what we're seeing now, to tell you the truth. Well, when I say we're seeing it, we're not seeing it because it's being held on tight hold between Ukraine and the United States at the moment. The fact of life is that, you know, if Ukraine has to give up the Donbass fortress region, it's going to be vulnerable, you know, ad infinitum to Russian attack in the future. So I can't believe that they're going to include that as part of the agreement.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me, I can't imagine there being a situation where there's something in text that both Russia and Ukraine can actually agree on.
Well, I think it's a tactic, to tell you the truth. I think it's designed to put pressure on the Kremlin. What people don't seem to realize is the Kremlin is holding out for what they call a maximalist solution. Nobody's put any pressure on Putin whatsoever to accede to anything. And until you do, you're not going to get any sense out of the Kremlin. The Kremlin wants everything and a bit more beyond that. So, you know, I think this is part of a power play, Alex, to say, look, 2 out of 3 have agreed. Why aren't you agreeing? But until you put pressure on the Kremlin, you know, they're bully boys. They won't accede to anything unless they get what they want. And as I said, a bit more besides.
I mean, let's imagine then that this is the case, putting pressure on the Kremlin to say, look, everyone else agrees with this, you've got to sign it, and they don't. But then what? Because it seems to me that Putin is quite capable of giving Donald Trump the runaround. I think very few world leaders are, but he is more than able to do it, it seems. And I started to wonder, is there a chance that America might actually be a little bit afraid of Putin?
No, it certainly doesn't want to go to war with Putin over this. It doesn't want to, you know, it's got as big a debt as it had at the end of the Second World War. This is not a good time to go into war against anybody. And war's bad anyway, isn't it? But the fact of life is that, you know, Donald Trump wants the Europeans to take the burden of Ukraine's defense. That's what he's trying to force at the moment. And I'm afraid, you know, our own prime minister and the French president are running into that without even thinking about it. So we've got to be very careful here about what everybody signs up to. There is no security guarantee that you can give the Ukrainians that basically Russia will honor. We know Putin lies. We know that he'll go back on his word in future. Remember, Russia is a guarantor of Ukraine's borders after the Treaty of Budapest in 1994. So, you know, you can't rely on him at all. Similarly, you know, America's saying, look, we'll guarantee your borders. Well, if America's distracted somewhere else, like with China or some other crisis, that guarantee probably isn't going to hold good either. The fact of life is that the best people who can be peacekeepers and defenders of Ukraine, are the Ukrainians. And we need to arm them to the teeth to say, look, if there's any messing around in future with Russia, you're in a position to defend yourselves. Because I know what's going to happen. There won't be any direct attack on Ukraine. It'll be little green men and grey zone warfare around the edges. And suddenly, Ukraine's borders will be porous. It won't be enough to provoke a war with America or with Europe. And, you know, by that time, Putin will have switched his focus to Sweden and Finland and the Baltic states.
Wow. Rear Admiral Chris Parry, thank you ever so much for joining us today. It just seems like we're going to be going on and on forever around in circles with this idea of coming up with a diplomatic solution between Russia and Ukraine. We can but dream. Let's speak quickly before we go to adverts to Simon, who is in Northamptonshire. Good afternoon, Simon. What can I do you for?
Good afternoon, Alex. It was just in response to your being Chancellor for a day, which sounds like an exciting job. My idea would be that every time there is the phrase uttered by those in power or those in public office that lessons will be learned, we put a tax on that. But what we should also do is get members of the public co-opted to teach said people a lesson, have them in a classroom for a week, and these people sacrifice their salary and pay it to the members of the public to teach them a lesson and say, right, this is how things actually work. Then you might actually have lessons being learned and people stop trotting out that phrase.
That is a very sensible idea. Well, let's just hope, after listening to that, lessons can be learned. Thank you ever so much, Simon in Northamptonshire. If you've got an idea of what you would tax, and come on, we like being a bit obtuse here. What would I tax? I mean, do you know what? I would come up with a special tax bracket for lefty lawyers. Because they earn a lot of money. They make terrible decisions. Every single decision they seem to make is against the national interest. So, yeah, why not have a special... Every time they make a judgment, then they have to pay a tax on the money they've made from that case, which is at 80% at the very least, if not 100%. That might stop them in their tracks. What are your thoughts? 03444 99 1000 is the number to call. You can send me a WhatsApp or leave me a voice note on that number on WhatsApp. That's what I would like the most. 87222 is the number if you'd like to send me a text message. Right, talk before you text. Going to take a short break now. But after the break, we're going to be discussing a leaked memo which reveals that jury trials are likely to be scrapped, apart from in the cases of killers and rapists, in order to clear the backlog in the judicial system. Is that really a good idea? We're discussing that after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. I'm going to read some of your messages now and hit up the voice notes because I like a bit of interaction. And there are some good messages, can I just say. Trevor has messaged saying, this is about Nigel Farage being sort of shopped by someone who allegedly says that when he was a schoolboy, he made racist comments. Well, Trevor rightly points out the BBC was still showing the black and white minstrel show in 1978. So does that mean that they're still racist as well? Yes. Very good point. On the young Farage situation, says Ian, Starmer attended a communist camp when he was younger. Does that make him a communist? I think we know the answer to that, don't we? We could all tax lefties that wear nose rings, says Amit from Loughborough. It will bring in billions a year. Yeah, those ones a bit like that they put in cattle or like, you know, panage pigs in the New Forest so they don't destroy tree roots. What is it with people on the left trying to make themselves as ugly as possible? It's like a proper socialist thing, isn't it? It's like, well, you know, I've been dealt a bad hand by life anyway, which is why I'm bitter and twisted. I may go the whole hog and make myself literally look despicable. Horrible natty hair, short fringes, nose rings. I mean, do they possess mirrors? Clearly not. And let's hear now some voice notes on what your possible sin taxes would be. This is Jack.
If I was Chancellor for the day, I'd maybe look at taxing people not doing enough steps, not enough exercise, walking. Obviously, consider those that are not able to, but tax the people that are just sitting around doing nothing. Comes in well with their digital ID that they want to push, as they'll probably be able to look at what people are doing anyway.
I'll tell you what, Jack, if West Streeting hears that, it'll be adopting that policy tomorrow to go alongside the sugar tax. Let's now listen to what Sam has to say.
Idea for a sin tax would be for people who trim up for Christmas before, let's say, December the 10th.
Is that the official date that we can start doing Christmas? I think Advent calendars start chiming in. You've got to consult with God and the Bible on when, like, you know, the celebrations for Christmas should begin. There's loads of rules around that. And you know what? It's so miserable out there. I'm kind of looking forward to it getting Christmassy. So I don't accept any of those. Not that they weren't, you know, I like people having their suggestions, but we can do better than that, can't we? Can you do better than that? 03444991000 is the WhatsApp number. Leave me a voice note, please. OK, now let's talk about the fact that, well, justice seems to be in the crosshairs from the Justice Secretary himself, because a leaked David Lammy memo has revealed that there is an intention to scrap jury trials, except for rapists and killers. And this is a radical plan to clear the court backlog. This would mean that all other serious criminal offences, including sex offences such as, well, paedophilia, would be heard by a judge alone. Do you trust judges to make sound decisions? Let's speak now to Vanessa Frake, who's a Justice Advisor to Reform UK and a former prison governor. This is, you know, it might seem like a sort of boring technicality, but this, in terms of justice, is quite a bold and radical overhaul. Is this going to mean people might not necessarily get what is perceived to be a fair trial, do you think?
Well, I think, first of all, I think that everybody is entitled to a fair trial. They are entitled to be judged by their peers. You know, the 12 juries thing goes back to the Bible. It's believed Henry II put his stamp on the fact that we have 12 jurors in this country. But, you know, this is yet another turnaround from this government. If I may quote David Lammy, who posted on social media in 2020, "Trials are a fundamental part of our democratic settlement. Criminal trials without juries are a bad idea." Well, well, well. So again, a turnaround from this government. I know that there is a backlog in the courts. It goes back to COVID and then the barristers' strike. And I think there's something like 80,000 people awaiting trial. I do understand, you know, there is a need for radical reform to get it cleared. But, you know, David Gauke only said that it should be minor crimes, and that should be done by a judge and 2 magistrates. I don't believe that, you know, public confidence in our justice system is probably at -20 2 or 3 at the moment,
Right.
at best.
And especially at a time when I feel like a lot of people out there feel like the judicial system has itself become politicised, particularly some of the rulings of judges when they are acting alone, when they are deciding whether someone can be deported or whether they are deciding if someone deserves a custodial sentence for something they've put up on social media. That, like you said, confidence in the judicial system is at an all-time low. But I would say acutely when it comes to whether or not we've got impartial judges. And what this means is basically, apart from the most serious of crimes, we're all going to be at the wit and whim of just one person who will bring to bear, because you can't help it as a human being, they'll bring to bear their own prejudices. A judge is supposed to be neutral and look at things by the letter of the law, but you cannot have a full frontal lobotomy and then go and sit with a wig on and a little gavel. It's always the case that a judge will have their own slant on certain things. And I just think that this is going to essentially make the judicial system even more vulnerable to criticism.
Absolutely, Alex. Totally agree with you. And we know that, judges, I think, the majority of them are very out of touch with the likes of you and me and Joe Public, and I think, some of the sentences or lack of sentences that has been handed down over the last sort of 2 or 3 years has been perceived by many as a two-tier justice system. And I think if you have one person deciding all guilty or not guilty and then the sentence, I think you're just asking for trouble. There will be innocent people who get sentences and there will be guilty people who don't.
Even the Criminal Bar Association, which represents barristers in England and Wales, has said it's the wrong decision, saying, while delays in the Crown Court are scandalous, the solution is not an uncosted, untested replacement for trial by jury. Like you said, this completely overthrows centuries of what was considered to be the fairest way of putting somebody on trial. Do you think that this is going to, it's going to take primary legislation in order for it to pass? Do you think it will?
Well, I really don't know. I would imagine that David Lammy's probably hopping up and down about it being leaked. He'll probably backtrack again because he's quite good at that. But I seriously hope not, because I don't think it's good for the public, the justice system and the country. I think it shows a complete lack of understanding of our justice and jury system.
I think it puts us on a par with mad nations like Iran, quite frankly. Vanessa Frake, thank you ever so much. Justice advisor to Reform UK and a former prison governor. We're going to take a short break now, but coming up after the break, I'm going to do a little disclaimer, a little early warning, because we're going to be talking about an extremely horrific case from Italy, a very brutal sex attack. So if it's the sort of thing that is going to upset you, I would recommend you turn the volume down or go and listen to a pop song or something for the next 15 minutes and rejoin us again at 5 o'clock. Or if you've got little ones around you, you might want to consider whether they should be party to our next topic of conversation. We're going to be discussing something very awful that has happened in Italy after this break.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Now, as I warned before the break, we are going to be talking about a very horrific crime that's taken place in Italy, a sex attack. It's going to potentially be quite disturbing for some people. So if you don't want to listen to this next segment, then join us again at 5 o'clock. If you've got little ones, give them the earmuffs. But if you want to stay with us, you'll be pleased to know we are once again joined by the brilliant, the exceptional, and all-time favourite of this channel, Ralph Schulhammer, political theorist, head of the Centre for Applied History at the Matthias Corvinus Collegium in Budapest. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Oh, perfectly.
Oh.
Well put. You're an honorary Hungarian now, Alex.
Oh, look at us. We look like we could be in some sort of folk group together with our outfits. Nice.
Yeah, see, my chair fits once again your outfit. It's I don't know how we do it.
I love it.
We're not planning this.
I think, Ralph, the universe is trying to tell us something.
Obviously.
Now, let's talk about Italy, because we hear a lot about things that have happened in the United Kingdom, attacks from so-called asylum seekers, migrants, and so forth. There have been a number of incidences that I am aware of in Germany, in Belgium, in France. It is not unique to the United Kingdom that there are young men coming from predominantly Muslim countries who are doing unspeakable things. Well, a particular story in Italy is especially ghastly. And this is what, do you know, Ralph, why don't you tell the story rather than me?
Well, if I got the story correct, it was to cut the most horrific parts as short as possible. So basically, a young man, I think about in the early 20s or not even in their 20s, was forced to watch his girlfriend getting raped while he, I think, was held down by two men of Moroccan descent or from Morocco. So he was more or less forced to watch while his girlfriend was raped, to put it bluntly. And this is a pattern, I think, that we have seen. It started a couple of years ago. I'm sure that many of your viewers are familiar with the story, the so-called New Year's Eve in Cologne in Germany, where you had this massive epidemic during one night of women being groped, women being touched, women being assaulted. And this has been a pattern ever since. I think it is very important, before we talk about the details of this story, to understand that this is not about sexual gratification. It is about power. I mean, this is a very, very important thing. The idea here is that you have men from another culture coming to our countries and showing that they basically can do whatever they want without being punished by the government, without being held to account. So this is not about sex. This is about power. And I think it is time that we understand this.
And actually, frankly, I would say this goes as far as becoming racism, because these people, in this particular incident, the perpetrators are believed to be from Morocco. There's up to 5 people involved in the attack. They dragged this man out of his car. He was 18 years old, and he was with his fiancée. They parked up on a quiet corner in a park in the eastern part of the capital, Rome. They broke the window. They pulled the man from his car. who's 24 years old, before forcing the woman out of the car. They then held him down and did the unthinkable to her. He was screaming for help, begging them to stop, unable to break free. I mean, it's just horrifying. And you talk about what happened in Cologne. It was 2016 or something on New Year's Eve. 1,250, I believe, sexual attacks in the main square New Year's Eve. And pretty much all of them, if not all of them, were perpetrated by North Africans and Middle Eastern men against young local women. The same thing, I believe, actually happened in Milan. New Year's Eve is either the last one or the one before. And frankly, if it happened in the one before the last, it probably happened at the last one as well. There's been incidences of these so-called lover boy groups in places like Belgium, where you've got a group of young, again, Muslim men who target a young girl. One of them becomes their boyfriend, and then the rest of them all take advantage of her. This is frankly now a European-wide problem, and we have the receipts, we have the evidence that this is going on.
There is this vast misunderstanding among, particularly, I know we overuse this term sometimes, but here I think it is accurate, about among the ruling European elite, that they think all of this is just a big misunderstanding. This was also after the New Year's night in Cologne. They say that, oh, you don't understand. They are just confused. I mean, there were court cases. There was one in Germany, right, where the rape of a young boy in a public swimming pool, where the perpetrator got off with a very, very, no jail time, no nothing, basically with got out on bail, and the justification was that, well, he didn't know, right? He didn't know that apparently in Austrian and German public swimming pools, you're not supposed to rape young boys. We had similar cases where I think in the UK there was a rape where the argument was that the men didn't know that you're not supposed to rape women. So there's this delusion, particularly on the left, that they say, oh no, they're just like us. They just happen not to know the rules. Of course they know the rules. They have cell phones. They know precisely how it works. But not all of them, but a significant number, they come here and they expect almost, right, that they can behave like this with impunity. And honestly, partially they're correct. There was even this absurd idea that in Germany that women made up those stories, right, in order to, gain support for the far right or whatever. So there's this deliberate, this willful blindness on part of decision makers who do not understand that that comparison might be a little bit of a stretch, but I think it is not entirely wrong. This is the kind of behavior you see from invading armies, because I cannot stress this enough. It's not about sex, it's about power. Yeah. Look at the conversations, look at the text messages we had after gang rapes in Germany, in Austria, in the UK. It's about the white sluts and the white bitches. There's even this racial component with it, but not from the quote unquote racist Brits, but from those who commit those crimes.
Yeah, I must just in case I get in trouble with the regulator, I apologise to the audience for select language there that Ralph was directly citing and quoting, but apologies.
My apologies, yeah, my apologies.
We apologise sincerely. But, I mean, I want to know, what is the situation like across Europe? Because I read news reports from across the continent. I know full well that there are major issues from Finland to Sweden to Denmark to Germany to Italy to France to Belgium to Spain to Portugal to the Netherlands, you name it. We are not alone with our concern when it comes to the safety and the integrity of women and girls. And these young men we're bringing in from radically different cultures. I've seen riots happening in Ireland because of murders and sex attacks that have taken place at the hands of so-called asylum seekers there. In the United Kingdom, we have the Pink Lady movement and people protesting outside hotels. It's yet to become anything more than that. What's it like over the rest of Europe? Are we seeing the same thing as sort of people suddenly realising the enormity of what faces them, and this being sort of the trigger point almost when it comes to protesting against immigration, the flashpoint being actually now we can have the conversation about how this is impacting particularly on young women?
No, I mean, Ayaan Hirsi Ali wrote a book a couple of years ago with the very telling title Prey, where she documents all over Europe precisely those cases. There can be no doubt, even if you look at the statistics, wherever they are collected. I mean, this is another issue, right? That governments in some cases tried to hide what could empirically be measured. When you look at the statistics, there is a clear overrepresentation, as you just mentioned, of people with a certain migrant background. That the likelihood of being raped by a migrant from Algeria or Morocco is higher than being raped by a migrant from Japan or from Taiwan. I mean, this is just the reality. But once again, we have to talk about something else as well. Absurdly, in many cases, the very people who continuously vote for the parties that enable these kinds of people to come to our countries are young women. There is, I mean, and I mean no insult to young women, please don't mean, as you are one of them. So don't get me wrong. I know that not every one of them thinks.
No, but you're right. You're absolutely valid in what you say. There is this sort of strange suicidal empathy that, especially, I always say that it's a disaster that we keep telling people you've got to be compassionate. These people are vulnerable. You're a racist or you're a terrible person if you say anything bad about immigration. Because if actually, when it comes to sort of biologically having a herd mentality and wanting to fit in with the group, that is how women are wired up to be, particularly young women who want to come across as nice.
Yeah, no, we had a story a couple of 3 years ago. It was either out of Sweden or Norway, but definitely one of the Scandinavian countries, where a young woman was raped by a migrant, and she then claimed it was your regular Swedish guy, the tall blonde guy named Olaf, because she didn't want to support right-wing narratives. So you said suicidal empathy, and I think you're absolutely correct about this. And this seems to be fairly widespread among particularly young, urban, single women. Again, I'm just describing the demographics. I'm not a misogynist or anything.
No, you're right. I'm afraid, in my mind, facts cannot be racist or misogynistic. Facts are facts. I was talking earlier about, we have the Pink Ladies protests here in the United Kingdom, and people sort of talk in the context of, well, it's a tinderbox. At what point do things tip into actual civil unrest? Are there other countries in Europe where there's that real sense that things could blow up at any moment?
Well, I think it will tip into civil unrest, and this is something you see more in the UK at the moment than you see it in continental Europe, is when the mothers start to get upset, right? When the middle-aged mothers, when they start to get politically active, because usually they are the ones, it takes a lot to mobilize them, but I think gradually they start to be mobilized because they see what's happening to their daughters, they see what's happening to their children. And one thing that we cannot stress enough, if these kinds of behavior go unpunished, it is only a matter of time until, Austrians and Germans and Sweden will behave in a similar way. This is the problem. If you create conditions where I'm exaggerating here slightly, so don't get me wrong, but where the quote-unquote raping migrant is depicted as the alpha male, well, then you get a kind of behavior that others will want to emulate. So the very depiction in the media that the biggest threat to women is like the 1950s sitcom dad who makes corny jokes, whereas the guy with the migrant background is always the underestimated hero. Like, we create narratives around this with major situational
It sets a dangerous precedent. You're right. Ralph, thank you ever so much. I love catching up with you. The brilliant, erudite and gorgeous Ralph Schallhammer there. Listen, if you've been affected by any of the topics we're talking about, you can go on talkTV, talk.tv/helplines to get support.
Across the UK. On DAB+. On YouTube. On your mobile. And on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to the programme, and welcome back if you didn't join us for that last segment. I totally understand, quite frankly, but it's done and dusted. You can breathe a sigh of relief now. Do you know, talking about, well, during the advert breaks there, I was just asking the gorgeous Jodie if she wouldn't mind getting me a drink, because I'm strapped here, wired into all these various sockets. I'm like a hostage in this studio. I can't go and get my own bits and bobs, because if I did, I'd have to plug myself all back in like the robot of the news booth. And so she said to me, oh, she's a Scouse, and I can't do a Scouse accent, but she was asking me if I wanted, what does she say now? Do you want a cup of tea or a mocha? Mocha. And then we were discussing that basically in a Scouse accent, a C at the start of a word is a hard C, cappuccino. But the C in the middle of the word becomes a K. So for instance, Coca-Cola. Anyway, I never understood that before, but I feel like I'm learning how to be a northerner. Anyway, I asked for a cup of tea, so it kind of ruins the game. OK, let's get back to subjects that we should be talking about, not the Scouse accent. Although there's something amazing about the United Kingdom, right? That you can literally drive for like half an hour in a car and you come across a completely different accent. I love it. And then even when you've got a regional accent, you get the hyper-localised version of a regional accent. So, you know, someone will be like, that's not from Manchester. That's Stockport, or, you know, that's not Birmingham, that's the Black Country. Or I love it. I love it. I think we've probably got more accents per sort of square 50 miles than any other country on earth. Why? How did that happen? Where did that come from? That is not the question I'm asking you as the audience today. The question I am asking you, however, is if you were the Chancellor, what sort of things would you tax? And I don't want sensible stuff. I want the fun stuff. Maybe you could do an accent tax. If you're doing an accent tax, which one would you tax? Me, I'd go Glaswegian, because I actually don't understand what they say. They actually need subtitles, don't they? I mean, what? I'm British, and I'm like, oh my goodness, I have no idea how when someone from, like, I don't know, Nigeria comes over and finds themselves in Glasgow, which is apparently now the sort of immigration capital of the whole of the United Kingdom. There's more so-called asylum seekers in Glasgow than anywhere else. And I'm like, how on earth are they managing to speak to one another? Or maybe they all think they're speaking in Arabic. I don't know. Anyway, what would you tax if you were Chancellor for the day? 03444991000. The number to call if you want to have a chinwag at some point. Also the number to send me a WhatsApp message. Also the number to leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. If you would rather send me a text, it's 87222. Write talk before you text, please. OK, let's get back to business and talk about the big stories of the day, which there aren't really many. So we're going to dig around in the sort of not so big stories, which are leading the headlines. So now the BBC are going absolutely tonto on one particular story, right? Oh, it's so newsworthy. It is the most shocking thing you've ever heard. They've got their journalistic receipts. Don't you worry about this. They're banter rights on reporting the truth because, you know, in this climate, the BBC better make sure they're not being partisan. Oh, they don't have any systemic bias. Not at all. That's why they never reported on the fact our now Prime Minister was once in a communist working camp. They've never reported on the fact that Wes Streeting, who could be the next Prime Minister, if Sir Keir Starmer walks in the new year, that he actually wrote on social media really not that long ago that he wanted to throw people under a bus. They've not reported on the fact that, I've got a good example, the deputy leader of the Green Party wrote on Facebook in his social media posts that not supporting Hamas was white colonialism. No. The BBC don't see fit to talk about those things at all. They're not newsworthy. But tittle-tattle that over 50 years ago, someone might have said something in the playground which can't be substantiated. You're just relying on somebody's, evidence. So they're sort of memories. Can you remember something someone said in the playground 50 years ago? Can you? Really? What are you, a human dictaphone? I mean, he is some sort of, you know, very woke-looking theatre director that probably, oh, no, that didn't have any sway over his recollection, or as the late Queen might have said, recollections may vary. But no, the BBC think one of the biggest stories out right now is something that was in the newspapers, oh, yeah, about 3 days ago, because that's newsworthy all of a sudden. It is the fact that Nigel Farage was naughty at school and might have said some offensive things. Well, shall we have a little look? The reason this is sort of cropped up is because they've managed to shove a microphone under his nose in North Wales. So shall we see how he has responded to these allegations?
At school, categorically on the record, you did not racially abuse fellow people.
I would never, ever do it in a hurtful or insulting way.
That's not quite the same as not doing it.
It's 49 years ago. It's 49 years ago.
What difference is it? What difference to the time?
Isn't it? Well, I just entered my teens. Can I remember everything that happened at school? No, I can't. Have I ever been part of an extremist organisation or engaged in direct, unpleasant personal abuse, genuine abuse, on that basis? No.
You're not quite... That's very, very caveated. You're not quite ruling this out. The question is, did you ever racially abuse fellow pupils in school?
No.
You've caveated it with a hurtful way.
Not with intent.
What do you mean not with intent? I don't understand what you mean by not with intent. What does that mean?
You wouldn't do.
But what does that mean?
No.
No what?
No. I have never directly really tried to go and hurt.
Who is that morning BBC interviewer who's like, can you categorically say, oh, ITV apparently, apologies, wasn't the BBC this time, can you categorically say that 50 years ago, when you were a kid, you never said anything that today might be construed as racist? I mean, you want the man to answer the question honestly. How can he? He did. He said, like, you know, this is 49 years ago. Might have said something at some point, but I don't think I ever abused people. Oh, well, that's a caveat. I mean, for crying out loud. What, these people are imbeciles. They are a disgrace to the profession of journalism. That is such a non-question. This man is potentially going to be the Prime Minister of this country, and they want to know if he may or may not have said something in a playground 49 years ago. If anyone needs to go back to blimmin' school, it's that journalist. What a bonehead. And it's, you know, that was ITV, apparently. Do you know what? I used to work for ITV, and I did actually love my time working for ITV. Hand on heart, I did. I loved working at ITV, less so at the BBC. But I actually decided to do a little dig around. And I was saying in the first hour of the show, I've played the Google the BBC game, which I invented today. Thank you very much. You may also play. The rules are very simple. You go on Google. You think of a news story about a particular politician that you've seen in the papers or something that might have been online. And so you go, search term, BBC, plus name of politician, plus said scandal, and then look for the BBC headline, because to be honest, it's like, where's Wally? You can't find him. They barely seem to qualify half of these things as newsworthy. But if you are to simply put BBC Nigel Farage and the term racist, it's ridiculous. You could make a mini-series out of it. So really, you don't have systemic bias, you don't think, do you, the BBC? I think you do. And actually, I use good old Grok. I don't know, try it on ChatGPT. If someone can do that, right, that'd be quite good. Because I've done Grok and said, compare headlines about Starmer to Farage and tell me if there's any bias. And here's the stats. With Starmer, 50% had a negative tone, particularly about leadership threats or tax pledges. 50% had a neutral or positive tone. OK, right. So how does that compare to Farage? 80% have a negative tone, including allegations of racism, and 20% just have a neutral tone. Positive tone? 0. So I'm sorry, according to Grok, my little AI friend at the behest of Elon Musk's brilliance, at the BBC, banter rights are biased. If you've got ChatGPT or any other AI technology, why don't you put it in there and find out if you can give me some data on this? Right, let's speak now to Henry Hill, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home. I mean, Henry, let's talk about the Conservatives in all of this, because they are loosely attached to this story, which goes back to Kevin Hollinrake's post on social media, comparing something Reformer put up on their timeline to something with the Nazi Party, with Hitler. Hey-ho, here we go again. The problem is the Conservative Party can't seem to decide between them whether calling Nigel Farage a fascist and a racist is a good idea and a bad one. What do you think?
I mean, I don't think that the Conservative Party had any input into Kevin's tweet. That's not a defence of it, by the way. It's simply that I don't think that there's some grand committee deciding what he puts out. And
no, but there's been a response to this, and various people responded in different
I agree.
ways.
I'm going to come on to that. I'm just clarifying. I think that was Kevin, and it was moronic because, of course, you know what? You know who used to really love putting badges out? The Tories, right? The Primrose League was a Tory voluntary group that was actually quite sort of famous for having innumerable ranks and levels, and each one of them came with an enamel pin badge with something sort of imperial on it. So the Conservatives have a long history of using badges. Now, as far as I can see, the only association between the Nazi badge and the Reform badge was the fact that the Nazi badge had a bit of gold around the outside of it, right? I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. It doesn't even vaguely look like it. It uses a circle, which is quite a common shape in badges, and it's gold coloured. So it was an absolutely specious response. And you know that even tactically, apart from the fact that I think it's just grossly unfair, even tactically, it's ridiculous because who's going to be persuaded by that, right? Like if you're the Conservatives or indeed Labour or any other opponent of reform, right? The people you need to be speaking to are the people who are open to voting reform, either who used to vote for you and are going to vote reform now, or who are maybe still sticking with you but are open to voting for Nigel Farage. And not one of those people is going to be convinced that that little golden badge means that they're secretly Nazis, right? Like the only people who that content appeals to are people who already have absolutely no intention of voting for Nigel Farage or Reform UK, even if hell freezes over.
I mean, the thing is, right, so Kemi Badenoch, this is normally her kind of neck of the woods, right? The culture war stuff has always been, I think, her sort of comfort zone, where she sort of came to public prominence, where she excelled, where she spent most of the first year of leading the Conservative Party, very much encamped within that particular area of politics, where she felt, I think, the most at ease. And yet, it seems like she doesn't really know how to respond to this. When people have said to her, should Kevin Hollenrake have taken that post down? Should you penalise him for doing it? Do you think this is appropriate? And I consider Conservative Home very much to be the weather vane of the Conservative movement, the grassroots movement in the United Kingdom. And what I'm trying to assess is, I remember when I was head of press for UKIP 1.0 back in the day, and David Cameron came up with the idea that Brexiteers, or those who wanted to leave the EU, were fruitcakes, lunatics and closet racists. And it actually worked. It worked back then because it made people think that UKIP was something very dirty that should be ostracised, that they couldn't talk about politely around the dinner table. And so it was a tried and tested technique. I can remember all the dossiers that CCHQ happily produced about a peccadillo written on social media 10 years ago of a particular candidate for a parish council. I remember the man and the gay floods, who was a Conservative parish councillor who then defected to UKIP, and that was front page everywhere. This is a strategy that in times past has proven to be quite fruitful for the Conservative Party. Don't vote for them. They're really wonky. They're not nice after all. Come with us because our politics are the same, but we're not racist. Do you think that strategy works anymore?
No, I mean, I guess where I'd quibble with you is, I'm not entirely sure it was working 10 years ago. 20 or 15 years ago. But think about 10 years ago. That's what, 2015? UKIP came second in 100 constituencies in the 2015 general election. They were well on the way to a breakthrough. That's one of the reasons that David Cameron felt that he had to throw the EU referendum, right? So actually, this stuff really only works when something is right out on the fringes, right? If something is right out on the fringes, you can perhaps keep it there by not normalising it. Think about the United Front, and I'm not equating UKIP and the BNP, but I'm just talking about in terms of tactics. Think about the way that politics united against the BNP, right? Back sort of when the BNP was starting to pick up council seats, they won a couple of MEPs. That kind of thing can be effective. But the problem is that once a party does actually have enough of a point that the public keep listening to it, and enough of the public listen to it that it breaks through, this sort of stuff no longer works. Because I don't think your average voter, your average person reading a newspaper, watching the television news, is really impressed by any of it. It's not persuasive. And the really problematic thing for the big parties is that once you've got locked into that sort of mindset of, okay, we're just not going to engage with these people, we're going to call them names and lock them out, it's really, really hard to get out of that mindset and start taking them seriously. Which is why I think you can see what's happened with Reform UK. The Conservatives remained trapped in that mindset of, we're just going to keep doing what we were doing, we're going to keep dismissing Nigel Farage and Reform UK, we're going to keep saying they're a minor party and all the rest of it. And what's happened now? Reform is polling top of the polls, right? because the Conservatives, they're criticised. They're constantly criticised by some people for their lurch to the right. That never happened. The remarkable thing about the Conservatives' taxation record, immigration record, public spending record, is that on every case there was no lurch to the right at all. And actually, maybe if they'd been a bit more responsive to the concerns that Reform UK embody, they would not be in a position where they're polling third.
I think a lot of people out there, whenever they hear racist, just think you are the problem, actually. We've not been able to deal with some of the most egregious and pressing matters of our time because no one's been able to talk about it. It's because of those people who wang about this accusation of bigotry every 5 seconds. That is why we had rape gangs basically being able to act with impunity because people were worried about being called racist. The sort of flagrant abuse of bandying about that term has actually been one of the most destabilising things in society, and I think people have had enough. Let's talk now about our good friend Mr. Lammy. He's the one who likes calling everything racist, doesn't he? He's done it in the past, or it's more like Donald Trump. He sort of gets in his crosshairs for being a fascist. I think he's said the same about Nigel Farage. Of course he has. But he also is prone to making a few gaffes, isn't he? I like to think of David Lammy featuring on Celebrity Mastermind. I'm sure you've all seen it, you at home, listening or watching. If you haven't, thankfully that thing is still stored in the annals of history, and it'll be available if you Google it. Because it turns out he probably isn't someone you'd have on your quiz team, and if you had him as a competitor on Trivial Pursuit, you could probably get a little bit trolled knowing that the game was still in safe hands. Because when asked about who his childhood role model was, I mean, it might actually be true. He might have loved this person growing up. But he basically talked about, first of all, Nelson Mandela. That's an easy one. Ching, 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 ching. Black hero lever. But then he throws in Bill Cosby. Apparently the footage had to be cut when he said this. Of course, you can't allow someone on the left wing to make a gaffe. Because, of course, Bill Cosby has been accused by more than 60 women of being drugged, raped or sexually assaulted. I mean, come on, Lammy. Are you really that stupid that someone goes, who's your hero? What am I supposed to say? Jimmy Savile? I mean, for crying out loud.
I mean, I think in fairness to David Lammy, I think the question was, who is your childhood hero? And of course, one of the really terrible things about Bill Cosby is the fact that, you know, an awful lot of people did really love him and the characters that he portrayed. And he used that persona in much the same way that Jimmy Savile did, actually. He used that persona to predate upon people. But it's still, if you're a politician, it is the kind of thing that has your poor media manager who's standing behind the cameraman off to the left, literally weeping blood when you say it on the air. So it's true. And on the subject of who he's called Nazis, I believe actually he called Brexiteers Nazis.
Oh, great, I'm one of them.
And then he refused to retract it.
It just, to me, look, when he was a kid, he might have really loved Bill Cosby. We can't blame him for that, but it just doesn't show a man who's particularly quick-witted, right? You can't seem to think on the spot.
It was a terrible answer to give even then, yeah.
Exactly. Henry Hill, thank you ever so much, Deputy Editor of Conservative Home then, a fellow Nazi because he voted for Brexit. I believe he did anyway. Right, OK, we're going to be taking a short break. Remember, if you want to let me know what you're going to tax, I've got lots of messages coming in here that I'm going to read out in a short while. You can add your voice to the chorus, 0344499 1000 is the number to call if you want to speak to me a bit later on in the show. Jodie will register your interest and give you a call back at the opportune moment, or you can use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to send me a text. If you're going to do that, write the word talk before you text, please. Now, after the break, we're going to be catching up with a woman who the Daily Mail labelled as a sick influencer. It's a label that she does not like, but they accused her of giving advice on social media for how people can claim certain aids, let's say, in the Access to Work scheme for mental health conditions. And she is an ADHD business coach. We're going to be asking her about that reporting and what she thinks of the scheme. That's coming up after this.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back. Now, yesterday we talked about a story where the taxpayer bill for a benefit scheme, which is apparently funded smartwatches, wobble boards, sunlight alarm clocks for people who are actually in work, but have claimed that they need a bit of help in order to stay in work, has reached £320 million. It's called the Access to Work scheme. It can hand claimants nearly £70,000 a year for equipment and support, including work coaches, noise-cancelling headphones and Apple smart watches. The bill for the scheme has actually jumped 22% compared to the year earlier, and various parts of the print media have blamed so-called sickfluencers for this, people who go online and say to people, hey, if you think you've got X, Y and Z, this is how you go about getting free stuff. Now, somebody who the Daily Mail pointed the finger at for doing this and who disputes that particular title is Maddie Alexander-Grout, who is an ADHD business coach. She's the author of the book Mad About Money, Managing Finances and Life with ADHD. Welcome to the show, Maddie. Thank you so much for joining us. First of all, explain to me about the actual work that you do as an ADHD coach.
Yeah, hi Alex, thank you for having me. So firstly, I help people, I'm a qualified neurodivergent specialist, so I help people who have got ADHD, autism, dyslexia, dyscalculia, and a whole host of other things. I help people to understand their brains better. I mainly work with business owners, so people who are self-employed, but I do also help people to get into the workplace. And I think that's a common misconception with access to work, is that it's a benefit for people who don't work. It's completely the opposite.
So why, I mean, let's talk specifically about, let's say, ADHD, because it's something that is talked about a lot now, and the waiting list to get diagnosed for ADHD is absolutely enormous. Yes. But I know various people who say to me that they believe they have ADHD, and people who do seem to genuinely suffer. What sort of things do people need in order to be able to go to work if they've got ADHD that require the taxpayer funding it as opposed to someone who doesn't?
Yeah, so it's all about levelling the playing field. It's about giving people the same access to be able to work as a neurotypical person. So, for example, assistive technology or coaching or some sort of support worker to help. Sometimes people need travel needs. And it's basically there to help people to work more rather than work less. Can you be more specific? Because I'm sort of sitting here trying to understand, because I don't know, and I feel like this is your area of expertise. Let's say if someone says, look, I believe I have ADHD, it's not diagnosed, but I believe I do. Why, I mean, what sort of things would they be claiming for? Why might they say I should have a certain computer, or I need a half-price smartwatch, for example? How does that benefit them? Yeah, so things like smartwatches, and to be honest, I rarely hear about smartwatches being given out. I think that's kind of a bit of a fabrication. It does happen sometimes, but they are, if you look at the science behind it, they help people who have got ADHD to manage time. And one of the things that people who have got ADHD struggle with is time blindness, cognitive function, emotional regulation. It's there to help people to go to work rather than stop working.
In your role as somebody who helps coach other people, do you think that there is, and I'm not trying to be tricky with you here, but do you think there's an over-diagnosis of certain conditions now? Because I'm always quite suspicious that, I think things were underdiagnosed in times past. I do, genuinely. I don't think there was an awareness of certain conditions that we are now better versed in today. But I also think there's a lot of people who walk about going, I've got PTSD, I've got OCD, I've got ADHD, when you think, you probably haven't.
The thing is, you kind of have to self-diagnose to a certain degree to be able to get a diagnosis for anything. The common cold, like people walk around saying they've got a cold, they might just have the snivels. I think it's not over-diagnosed for sure. I think the awareness around it is so much more now, and that's because people are learning about accessibility in the workplace. People are learning about ADHD, they're learning about autism. There's more information readily available, and there are more people training to be able to support those people. I don't think it's overdiagnosed. In fact, I think it's wildly underdiagnosed. 7 out of 1 in 7 people have ADHD, and that's that we know about. So the people who are walking around saying they've got ADHD, it might well be that they're on the waiting list. And I always say that we understand and we know our brains better than anybody else, and it's quite easy to, do some research and say, well, actually, I tick all those boxes.
Yeah, okay, I'm gonna ask you something, Max. I'm just thinking about myself here. So, for instance, I fidget a lot. I have eczema. There's an anxiety there, and I scratch all the time. I fiddle with a pen incessantly. Anyone watching that will know that I'm always messing about with something in my hand. In fact, so much so that when I used to have a desk job, I used to buy myself pots of Play-Doh so I could craft things, make little sculptures out of them. I always need to be doodling something or writing something down. I lose stuff incessantly. I've lost 3 hats in the space of 2 weeks. I can't actually sit and watch TV without doing a cryptic crossword at the same time because I just can't focus on it. But when I get into a topic, I really go down wormholes. I get obsessed with it, and I have terrible insomnia. Do I have ADHD?
Possibly. I'm not qualified to diagnose you, but to be completely honest with you, diagnosing on all of those traits, I mean, you do have to hit lots of different markers for ADHD. It's not just I'm a little bit forgetful or I fidget. Quite a lot of people fidget. There is a very strong criteria to get an ADHD diagnosis, but from what you're telling me, it wouldn't surprise me.
Oh, there you go. I'm going to see if I can get some free stuff. No, I'm joking. Look,
do you have problems accessing the workplace, though, Alex? Like this is the thing.
Yeah, but this is the thing. I'm here, aren't I? And I think a lot of people out there, everyone could have a something. That's my view. Everybody. I mean, is there anybody out there who's just sort of coasting through life who doesn't feel sad and therefore think I might have depression, or doesn't get stressed about something at work and thinks, oh, I might have anxiety, or isn't a fidgeter or has a short attention span if they're finding something tedious. I mean, I think, look, like I said, my biggest blight in life is having dreadful itchy skin. I could probably get a free car on Motability for that, no doubt. And, it's triggered by all sorts of things, getting the London Underground, being in pollution. But I've never sort of felt like I've needed to reach out. I sort of self-motivate in order to come to work because that's how I've been brought up. When I was 14 years old, it's like, deliver newspapers, collect trolleys at Safeway because you've got to buy yourself a car and pay for your driving lessons. And I do wonder sometimes, can you see an element to this? I mean, look, I know that they called you a sickfluencer and you dispute that, and we're not going to make this personal about you. But do you actually think that there is No, I don't want to. But do you think there is a world out there where you look at some of these schemes where people don't need a formal diagnosis but can then sort of ask for certain things to be at least part subsidised? Do you think that we're getting a bit too generous and a bit too soft and actually potentially potentially some of the best medicine that you can give to people is a pragmatism, saying whatever you might have, you've got to overcome it. You've got to, there's got to be a dig deep and do this.
I think there could be more support for people who are struggling in the workplace. If more employment had, on-site work coaching, things like that, things that they could do internally to support employees, then potentially yes. But I think when it comes to things like access to work, you're right. The system is flawed, but it's flawed in so many ways. And I think people who are really genuinely struggling are the people who actually want to go to work. And this is the thing. So, I claim access to work. Well, I have done in the past anyway. And it's to help me to actually be able to work to my full capacity rather than not being able to work, burning out all the time, really struggling and actually being completely frazzled and overwhelmed all the time, which does happen. That's my way of wanting to contribute to society, and disabled people want to contribute to society. That is the fact of the matter. There are things that, I think it depends on the individual circumstance. So some people might be depressed, some people might have anxiety, but it depends how much that impacts their day to day, whether it impacts them in the workplace, whether it impacts the way that they earn money. If it's impacting them to a scale where they're about to be unemployed or they are unemployed, then it's actually more costly for the government to pay for somebody who's unemployed than it is for access to work.
Maddie, you can't say fairer than that. Thank you ever so much for coming on and giving us your side of the story. Maddie Alexander-Grout, who is an ADHD business coach. I don't know where I stand on this. I have sympathies. I'm well aware that people are neurodivergent. There's someone in particular I'm thinking of right now who I know personally who definitely is wired up in a way that isn't similar to other human beings. But I do wonder with some people saying that they need various bits and bobs. I reckon if I put in a claim, and said I need certain things, I don't know, UV, those daylight lamps or whatever to help me with my A-to-P and so on and so forth. Or, this is a high adrenaline career, sitting here and speaking for 3 hours off the cuff without scripting, and also thinking, I could get cancelled at any moment. It's very stressful. So perhaps I should have a taxpayer-funded holiday, because it's also quite depressing talking about the news day in, day out. I don't know. I think we're going a bit too far in the wrong direction. I'm not saying we shouldn't do something, but my personal view is we probably hand out a little too much. Let me know your thoughts on that and anything else. Remember, the big question of the day is, if you were Chancellor, what would you be taxing? Keep it stupid. 03444 99 1000 is the number to send me a WhatsApp, leave me a voice note on WhatsApp, or indeed to dial if you want to talk to me a bit later on in the programme. 87222 is the number to send me a text message. Write the word talk before you text. Now, when we come back, last night when I got home to the sticks, my wonderful neighbour Mia came over to see me, and she was like, "Oh, mate, did you see it? It's crazy today all around the Shire." I was in London. Why? What happened? The tractors were everywhere, covered in lights, beeping their horns, flags flying. I was like, didn't see that in the capital. So I did some digging. Apparently there was a huge protest going on around the country yesterday. What was it about? Well, we're going to be telling you all about that after the break.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Welcome back to the show. Now, if you were in my part of the world yesterday when I was here, you might have seen a sort of cavalcade of very upset agricultural workers, a vehicular demonstration against government policy because the farmers have begun having a sort of day of unity to protest against some of the more egregious policies which they say is really disrupting the farming sector. Let's speak now to Matt Cullen, who is a beef farmer, a fourth-generation beef farmer based just outside of Canterbury in Kent. Matt, I completely missed all the sort of hullabaloo and the jamboree yesterday. I wish I hadn't. I'd have been standing there cheering them on, wearing my stock farmer T-shirt.
Yeah, look, farmers across the country yesterday took unity to protest against the IHT, which the Chancellor brought in her budget last year and then was going to revisit in the early hours of the autumn budget last year, again in the spring, and then it's going to come in this autumn budget that everyone's been dreading. It's the family tax. It's going to wipe out all the family farms, and that's why farmers up and down the country are real anger because the figures are so wrong. The government are not listening to nor NFU, National Farmers Union, of their true figures. They are set on their Whitehall figures. That's what they believe is right. What decimating is going to happen is a small proportion, but actually it's going to wipe out a mass amount of family farms across the UK. And that's why farmers are so angry. And that's why yesterday you saw protests across the country, go slows. Farmers are not happy. You know, when farmers go, that's food security going. And that's the key feature of this, which is about is, you know, we are custodians of the land. We're here to grow and produce food to feed the whole nation. And when you start having to lose your shop front by 20% to pay inheritance tax, that diminishes the amount of food that we can produce. And, you know, we are only an industry that only is making a 1% return. There are no other industries that are making a 1% return on their investment that we are.
No, I'm with you entirely. It's absolutely disgusting the way this government is treating farmers, quite frankly. And I understand that when it was the outbreak of the Second World War, which of course plunged us into rationing, because all of a sudden we found that there wasn't enough food security. We only had enough food, really, in terms of resilience, to last us 6 weeks. I think something in the region of maybe 70% of food that we ate in the United Kingdom was from the United Kingdom. My understanding now is that figure is even lower because we're attacking farming so much and we've only got enough food security to last 6 days.
Yeah, I mean, we're only a producer, about 58% is what we produce of our own in this country. It's mind-boggling, really. I mean, yes, we all know there'll be exotic stuff that has to be imported in that we can't grow here. But when we're only at 58%, and when you think of the population that is growing, doubling every year, year in, year out, you know, it's a lot of mouths to feed. And we can't be reliant on other countries because, as we all know, there's world conflict going on around the world. It's a very toxic place. And it's all right them to say, well, we can have this and that off of other countries. But we all know when a war breaks out, and what happened in World War I and World War II, those countries only look after themselves. And we ended up in a situation very short on food.
I mean, not just that. When you look at anything that disrupts supply chains, such as COVID, or actually when you look at whether it be the Houthi rebels attacking boats in the middle of the sea, those who dominate maritime routes and imports and exports can essentially run the world. And if you want to know what our enemies might be planning, look at what our enemies are doing. China has a massive propaganda scheme at the moment to actually get as many people as possible to enter farming and to buy Chinese origin goods. So you kind of see that, well, China actually understands the situation. Yep. And I think it's so dangerous. But it isn't just inheritance tax, is it, that's really attacking farming? Driving around Wiltshire and Gloucestershire, I see signs everywhere saying, don't put up blimmin' solar panels everywhere.
Yeah, and that's another Ed Miliband, enterprise that lets reduce farming payments goes, the subsidies disappearing, that we were there to support us producing food lower than the producer cost of production. and now it's solar panels everywhere. Let's put solar panels up everywhere. Well, that doesn't grow food. You know, the more farmland you take out to put it to solar panels or housing, that's less food grown in this country. You are more relying than on, as I back earlier, back to foreign countries. It is mind-boggling, and you just cannot work out that there are these they're just, well, I can't even say the words on air because it's just wrong to say. I use the word thick people in Whitehall that make these policies up, that these MPs then want to drive these decisions. They have no respect for farmers. They've never worked on a farm. They've never done a hard day's in their life, and they don't get it. And they just seem to think that food's going to come from all around the world and it'd be fine.
Now, I don't tend to eat much beef myself, but you are a beef farmer. But my understanding is this, and I don't come from a farming background, but I do live in a very agrarian county of Gloucestershire. In fact, my next door neighbours all say moo, and I have a feeling that in about a year's time I might not see them anymore. They might be in the local butchers. But I try not to think about it because they're all very cute. But my understanding is this, the fact that I can see my next door neighbours all saying moo reflects what I understand about UK farming, which is we have a very old-fashioned pastoral way of doing it, right? We have sheep and cows in fields eating grass as God intended, as one would hope to see happen. But you go to other countries where we might wish to import beef at a lower price, and they have these poor animals shut up in hangars, basically, you know, big industrial units being fed nonsense where their only exercise is to be chained to a block of concrete and walk round and round in a circle.
And we have the highest welfare standards in the country and around the world. There's no higher welfare standards than us in the UK. And that's what's so alarming, that they just want to import cheap food, have no real veterinary agreement. Let's get it in, it's cheaper, it'll bring food inflation down, and we just do away with the farmers. Big corporations can buy up land for development, land for solar panels, and we get rid of all the small family farms. And at the end of the day, what the public got to remember, the countryside would not look like it does if it wasn't for the farmers managing it. It would just look barren, overgrown, it'd look horrible. And you've got to remember, everyone has a food 3 times a day, breakfast, dinner and evening tea, or the other way around. But, you know, and that all comes from a farmer. That doesn't just come from a supermarket shelf.
Yeah, well, here, look, I am in full support. I'm the first one to stick on my hunter wellies and my barber jacket, get a bit of manure on my feet and come out and support you guys. What have you got planned next?
Well, surprising, I can just give you a bit of an update. So there was a big protest happening tomorrow in London. Farmers were all going to London to protest because it's budget day. And that has now just had to be cancelled due to pressure from the government on the Met. So at 3 o'clock, just looking at the email that I've just been sent, the government have put pressure on the Met to basically stop the peaceful protests that we've done so happy by, and that was being organised by the Berkshire farmers that was happening, and that would have been 500 odd tractors going tomorrow, and that's now just being cancelled because of pressure from government because of its budget day.
That's disgusting.
So that is, once again, two-tier policing.
Yeah.
At its
disgusting. I doubt they put pressure on the Met to not have, you know, the pro-Palestine protest. But when it comes to the people who feed the country, you shut up. You don't get to come and say your piece. Do it anyway, I say. And when you're doing the tractor pulls at Christmas, they're amazing things. If anyone lives somewhere rural, a lot of the farmers' associations, the Young Farmers Club, etc., do these things called tractor pulls, where they decorate all their tractors and they drive through the streets. It makes me cry. I'm weird. I've got this thing when I see tractors, you know, I get tearful.
We've all got 7 days. We're working 7 days a week. That's what we're doing. We've got jobs to do, and in that time, we find time to Christmas time to decorate our tractors, go out, raise money for charities. You know, that's what we do. We like doing that. The kids like it. You know, we came up to express that, you know, the real anger that we have, which was going to happen tomorrow. We'd been up, as you know, back in February. We'd been up last year in December again, protesting. We'd been on foot this time a week ago last year. And that's the real frustrating thing. You know, they think the right not to listen and then try and dictate from the powers that be. And, you know, it's going to backfire.
It disgusts me. Look, Matt, I'm sure all the audience are supporting you. Matt Cullen, who's a beef farmer, thank you ever so much. I loved it when we had the farmers' protests in London. I looked out across Parliament Square and I've never seen a scene so British. It was just barber jackets and flat caps as far as the eye could see. There was something really quite wonderful about it. OK, we're going to take a short break now. When we come back, we're going to be discussing all the sports headlines of the day. See you after this.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show and welcome into the studio of soundness. Sean Custis, head of sports with The Sun. Now, you said last night that Man United would win. I said, do you know what happens when sports journalists, especially or any journalist, makes a prediction? It always goes the other way. Was I right?
You were right. Which is shocking, really.
What went wrong?
But typical Man United, of course, they'd gone 5 games without defeat, 3 wins and 2 draws, and they went and lost at home to Everton, who actually only had 10 men for most of the game because 2 of their own players had a fight, and it resulted...
But with each other?
With each other. And
No!
It resulted in Idrissa Gueye, who slapped Michael Keane, being sent off.
Why? What, slapped him on the face or something?
Yes, and you get sent off if you slap your own player. I mean, to me, does it matter if you slap your own player? Well, you do. You get sent off. One
thing I really love about football, not football, rugby compared to football, is in football, you know, someone falls over and rolls around 5 times. It's called doing the Neymar, isn't it? Or it was about 20 years ago or something. And then start bursting into tears. Oh, someone tripped me up. And the ref sort of runs along going, toot. In rugby, the ref stands there for a good 15 seconds while people are like, you know, gouging each other's eyes out and just goes, oh, well, you know, you carry on. And then chaps, calm it down.
Well, they didn't let Idrissa Gueye carry on, and he slapped Michael Keane. He got sent off, but Everton won with a brilliant goal by Keane in Dewsbury Hall. And yeah, well done, Everton. And Man United are back in crisis. No wins in the last 3 games, 2 points out of 9, and everybody's now questioning them again. But such is the way of Man United. It's always the biggest news.
Now, Manchester has 2 teams, doesn't it? That's one thing I do know about football. And apparently Manchester City are up to stuff.
Yes.
Oh, they just got City. What? Not Manchester
City? No, they are Manchester City.
Oh,
yes,
right.
I'm just saying that's the other Manchester team.
Just City. Oh, I thought they'd had some sort of Prince-like name change, whether Manchester's been dropped for some reason.
No.
We're just
anyway,
City now.
They're home to Bayer Leverkusen, which is not the most exciting of ties, to be fair, and they would be expected to win it. But the pick of the games tonight, even though I'm a Newcastle fan and we're playing at Marseille, which would be a spicy encounter, pick of the games tonight is Chelsea versus Barcelona, which I think even you, Alex, will recognise that Barcelona, they're pretty big.
Are they? What, they're bigger than Chelsea?
They are bigger than Chelsea. They're one of the most,
even you, it's like
they're one of the most famous clubs in the world, Barcelona. And
who's their most famous player?
That's going to be Lamine Yamal, maybe.
Who?
Lamine Yamal. He plays for Spain.
That sounds like someone speaking from underneath the bottom of a swimming pool. Okay.
He's a very good player, very good young player, star of the Euros. That's going to be a tasty encounter because, as you well know, Chelsea are the World Club champions.
Are they?
They are.
Do you know, if I was going to support a football team, it would be Chelsea. Because when I used to live in Ghana back in 2006, it seemed half of West Africa played for Chelsea back then. Michael Essien and Didier Drogba and...
Well, Didier Drogba's Ivory Coast, to be fair.
Oh, no, yeah, but no, half of West Africa.
Oh, West Africa.
Half of West Africa. Solomon Kalou. There was
yes, that's right.
Obi-Wan Kenobi. What was his name? John Obi.
Hey, pretty good. John Obi Mikel.
Yeah, so when I lived in Africa, you know, it was the African Cup of Nations.
Yes,
and
they used to be in it all the time.
And actually, it's more fun, that version. Because when I say sport with the risk of maiming, the African Cup of Nations brings that sort of energy, I think.
Brilliant tournament.
Yeah, sort of like... They're sort of quite muscular, quite sort of compared to the Premier League.
One thing that might be a bit of a disappointment just on Chelsea-Barcelona tonight is that Marcus Rashford, who is on loan
I
there
heard
from
of him because he had
Manchester
a thing about
United.
school dinners or something.
He's on, he used to promote school dinners, and a very good campaign it was too. He's on loan at Barcelona, but I don't think he's going to be fit enough to start tonight. Might only be on the bench because he's had a cold, and he only returned to training at the weekend. But we might see him in the second half. And as I say, Newcastle are playing at Marseille as well.
Newcastle. My dad's from Durham, so I know that it's not Newcastle, it's Newcastle.
No, that's the south.
Yeah, I used to live up in Newcastle myself. One of the best cities on earth. I used to live on Quayside, actually, right opposite the Gateshead Sage. No, right opposite the Gateshead Sage on the Quayside, just by the courts.
Is this entertaining for the listeners?
No, probably not. But, you know, if you can add that to my Wikipedia page now, by the way, if you want to. Now, Liverpool apparently has had a terrible start to the season. I'm reading my crib notes here.
Very well, yeah.
And their boss, a man who goes by the name of Arne Slot, could be in trouble.
Well, they've got a home game against PSV tomorrow night, just Champions League game. So Arne Slot was up for interview today trying to explain away all their bad results recently, and he said it's a ridiculous run. It is, considering they're the champions. They've now lost 6 out of 7, and there's a lot of concern around about whether Arne is the man for the job, even among Liverpool fans. I mean, he won the title last season, but many people think he did it with Jurgen Klopp's team, who was the previous manager, and he did it with the team. So he's had a good opportunity to spend a lot of money in the summer, spent 250 million on 2 players, Isaac and Wirtz, who haven't played very well.
So might they be giving his slot to someone else?
They might do, but maybe not just yet. But it's fair to say he's under a little bit of stress.
Oh. Well, it's okay. He might be able to apply for an access to work benefit, like a fidget spinner on the taxpayer. You'd have to listen to the first bit of the show to get that. But now, you informed me just before we went live that it's actually the Football World Cup next year. It comes around quick, doesn't it?
Funnily enough, I thought you might have known that, but you
have no idea.
Yes, it is.
You can't
it's that Football World
overestimate
Cup
my football ignorance.
It is, and the draw takes place in December in Washington.
That famous land of football, America.
Yeah.
Or is it Washington in the northeast?
I mean, the World Cup is actually in America, Mexico, and Canada next summer, so it's split.
Oh, is it?
But they're having the draw in America. And one of the new style things they're going to do is a seeded system like Wimbledon. So England will be one of those seeds. There'll be 12 seeds, but England are interestingly in one of the top 4 seeds. So it means they'll have a slightly easier path, in theory, to the final, providing they win their group. So they're going to be separated from Spain and Argentina. They wouldn't be able to meet either of them until the final.
So they're going to put like the teams who stand half a chance of doing well and sort of distribute them in different playoff groups or whatever.
So, like, we were beaten by France at Qatar 2022 under this system, provided we won our qualifying group. We couldn't face France till the semi-final, and as I say, it wouldn't be Spain or Argentina till the final. we're getting ahead of ourselves, thinking England are going to get to that point.
It's tasty in football right now, because the last time I paid any attention to football was I was living in Belgium, and they got really far in the World Cup.
They did.
And the Belgians
They
went
used to have a very good
bonkers.
side.
And I was like, really? This tiny little country?
They've had their time. They were a very good side, but I think they're fading slightly now. But hey, Argentina, Spain, still the teams to worry about. France, definitely. Germany maybe okay.
Other than England, what about our other nations? Because I know at one point Wales and Scotland and Ireland were trying to get in.
They can all qualify at the moment. Every nation can qualify, but they've got playoffs. They have playoffs coming up in March. So Wales, Scotland have already qualified as well. Yes,
good
they have.
on them.
And there is a danger. Well, you might think it's good that England and Scotland could be in the same World Cup group. They're initially going to try and keep them
with
apart.
The seeding.
Yeah, they were initially going to try and keep them apart, but there's too many European teams, so we may get Scotland. And who knows, Wales, Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland could yet be there too.
There you go, Sean. Thank you ever so much. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere, because I'm with you for another hour.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
And welcome back. Now, you'd have had to be living under a rock if you didn't realise it was the budget coming up this week, because for the past, I don't know how long, gazillion months, all we've heard is what might Rachel Reeves do? How's she going to hurt us even more? Because it seems to me that Number 11 have essentially been floating policies out in the media to test their reaction. And we are beginning to learn a few things now ahead of the actual budget. We know for certain, I think we can say, that there will be a sugar tax. You know, this is the way that the Labour government, having bust the economy, having run out of all of our money, flagrantly spending it on nonsense, and now saying, well, we're going to get all this extra money off you because it's for your own good. We're doing this to help you. I mean, bog off. The people who this stuff often affects the most are the actual working classes. If you've got loads of money and your milkshake's going to cost a bit more money, it doesn't really matter. But if you happen to be on the breadline, it does. But don't you worry, because what the hand giveth, the other hand taketh away, and vice versa. Because one thing that is just broken, apparently, is that the Labour Party are potentially going to be putting up the minimum wage and the living wage. In fact, the national living wage will rise by 4.1% to £12.71 an hour for those workers who are 21 and over. For a full-time worker over the age of 21, that means a pay increase of over £900 a year. Meanwhile, the national minimum wage rate for 18 to 20-year-olds will increase by 8.5% to £10.85 an hour, and for 16 to 17-year-olds by 6% to £8 an hour. Well, that seems all very well on the surface, doesn't it? Those at the bottom need the most help. Oh, we all live in hard times. We should increase the minimum wage. But what about the businesses that employ them? What if they suddenly think, do you know what? 8.5% means that we're going to have to lose 5 workers. Especially with the increase in employers' national insurance, especially with all these workers' rights that are supposed to be coming in, where you can have sick pay from day one and go on paternity leave before you've even set foot in the blimmin' office, for crying out loud. How on earth, the backbone of our economy, the SMEs, the small and medium-sized enterprises, that are so essential for a functioning economy, are they going to be able to cope with these announcements? Now, I've been asking you guys as well, if you were Chancellor, what would you tax? We've been trying to keep it funny. We don't want things to be too serious, because if we focus on the doom too much, we'll all be applying for the access to work benefits, won't we? And so people are saying, hey, do you know what would be a great idea? I would put higher rates of tax on cider. Love listening to you, but you're far too happy compared to the rest of us. Alan from Bedfordshire. Of course you're from Bedfordshire. If you're from the West Country right now, someone would be chasing you out of your house with a pitchfork. How dare you? Although, can I just say, there's a little thing that goes on in the world of cider, right? In the world of scrumpy, which is that when you suddenly have an alcohol percentage, an ABV, that is, I think, 7%, you suddenly get taxed the same level as wine, which is a lot more. So when you look at the ABVs on the side of your proper bag-in-box scrumpy ciders, they all happen to come in at 6.9. I'm not saying that that's not true. I think, just magically happens with fermented apple juice. Someone says tax sleeping in after 8:30 in the morning. I think you should just tax slankits, tax Netflix, tax working from home. If you're not actually providing footfall in the economy, maybe for the pleasure of sitting at home and essentially being relatively sedentary and suspiciously underactive, which I think most people working from home just aren't necessarily as industrious as their peers who actually commute to go to work. Maybe those people, for the ease of their lifestyle, should be faced with a bigger tax bill. Someone else has said we should tax pride flags, rainbow lanyards and blue hair dye. Someone else has said we should also tax hair dye of all different colours. So there you are. Keep your thoughts coming in. That was Mark in Camberley, a tax on blue, pink and green hair dye. But not the purple rinse, because Nana is still the backbone of this country. Keep your thoughts coming in, 03444 99 1000. Right, let's speak now to the brilliant Sir John Redwood, former Conservative Cabinet Minister in probably one of the most sensible governments our country has ever seen. Welcome to the show, Sir John. Let's start off with this breaking news, OK? Which is the fact that apparently the Labour Party are going to be putting up the minimum wage and the national living wage, the latter by 4.1%, but the former, the minimum wage, is going to be going up by 8.5%. On the surface, this seems like a kindly thing to do, but do you think this is going to adversely impact on small businesses who are already facing a really tough time?
Well, Alex, I agree that, of course, we want people to be better paid, and some of these wages are very low. But the danger now is that both governments have hiked the minimum wage quite a lot relative to the average wage, is that people in businesses will say, we haven't got the money to afford these younger people who don't have the same skills and the same training. So we're going to have fewer people overall, and we're going to have a few more experienced people rather than a lot more younger people. I'm desperately worried for the young people. We see youth unemployment climbing quite quickly under this government already, thanks to the tax on jobs, national insurance and the previous hike in the minimum wage. This could tip it over the top further, and there's one thing worse than being on a low minimum wage, and that's having no job at all.
Does this actually, I don't ask you this because I genuinely don't know, but we often hear that one of the problems with mass migration is importing labour that is far cheaper than our own people. Do things like these sorts of wage rises impact on that? Or if someone comes to work from abroad, they're also being paid minimum wage anyway?
Well, and the danger is that the government isn't enforcing the rules properly, and so quite a lot of people come in from abroad and join what is called the informal economy in polite society. And so they're not paying all these taxes, and they're not necessarily paying all these minimum and living wages. And that's the real scandal. Now, Labour say it's a scandal, but I don't see them doing much to enforce. And so a lot of regular businesses struggling to pay people the more decent wages that you have to by law are undercut by businesses that don't play by those rules. And so the migrant wins with the low and informal pay, and our young people stay at home.
Now, one thing that we also know the Labour Party are going to roll out tomorrow is the sugar tax. And this has been sort of mooted by people who are interested in public health for a long time, saying that actually we have a crisis of obesity. And if we are to put a sin tax on sugar, it might make people reconsider their diets and it might end up saving the NHS money. I kind of think that that's probably not going to happen, if I'm honest with you, because it seems to me that people are fairly set in their ways when it comes to the food that they eat and what they consume. And actually, by and large, people who are more likely to have an unhealthy diet because it is a cheaper diet, those who tend to go for ultra-processed food, tend to be the working classes. So it seems to me, like I was saying in my introduction, the hand that giveth also taketh away.
Well, I think you're right, and I think the milkshake is still normally a treat rather than a regular item every day for a child. And parents will still feel they need to give the child a treat from time to time, so they'll have to pay a bit more for it. But also, I don't like this strange modern socialism, which says that you're allowed to have all these treats, and you're allowed to get fat if you're on above average earnings, but you shouldn't be allowed to do it if you're on below average earnings. It's a very unfair and skewed policy.
Let's talk, before we move on as well, about, as well as increasing the national living wage and the minimum wage, it's been suggested there's going to be £15 billion extra poured into our welfare bill, when it seems to me, from things I've heard reported, that the IMF has sort of said, oh, listen, Britain, you've got a wonky economy. You're going to have to slash that welfare bill to stay afloat. And yet it seems to me that Number 11 haven't got that memo.
Well, they don't seem to, or they and their colleagues in the Department of Work and Pensions don't know how to implement a proper benefit strategy, because we want to get people off benefits into work, but this government has had record numbers signing up for a sick note for life, saying that you don't have to bother to try and get a job, you can just sit on benefits. And that is a big mistake. A lot of those people are not so ill that they can't do some work in the future. And it's quite wrong, I think, to write people off in their 20s or early 30s as no longer being able to work when we want to get them into work, particularly if they have mental health issues, because very often the best therapy is having more social contact with other people and feeling more worthwhile because you're doing something that people want to pay for. That is surely part of becoming an adult and being a successful member of the community.
I mean, that sense of industry and agency, very much Thatcherism. A woman who had a very successful record in office, a woman who didn't seem to be held back much by her gender, but apparently all the criticism of Rachel Reeves and the fact that she's having to double dip again for more money from us because she's failed to balance the books, well, it's all because she is a woman. Do you think that's right? Do you think women can't add up?
No, I think it's quite wrong. It's a slur on women, isn't it? And then this idea that a chancellor, because she's a woman, shouldn't be criticised. I mean, chancellors are always criticised. The men chancellors got an awful lot of stick. And my tip to Rachel is the worse you do with the economy, the more stick you're going to get. So get better at managing the economy, and you'll find that quite a lot of that criticism drops away and people start saying, oh, that wasn't so bad after all. But I fear we're going to have budget number 2, which just compounds the errors of budget number 1. I don't think she's learned anything from the disaster of budget number 1. We're talking about total public spending being 159 billion more next year than the last full Conservative year. And that's why we're struggling to tax people to death. And quite a lot of that spending, as you've rightly identified, is on benefits for people who we really ought to help into work, or it's on illegal migrants coming in, staying in hotels, or it's inviting in low-paid people from abroad when we ought to be providing those jobs for people already here. It's money down the drain in many cases, even more so when you see the colossal losses of the Bank of England and the Nationalised Railway, which we just have to pay for.
If I could tax anything, right, John, if I could choose a random spurious thing to suddenly increase a fantasy tax on, it would be isms. I am so done with all of the isms. Sexism, racism, fascism. And here we go again. The BBC, there was this, what I think is quite a spurious article in The Guardian of people who went to school with Nigel Farage almost 50 years ago, saying he said some pretty choice things in the playground. Now, in the words of the late Queen, recollections may vary. But roll the clock forward a few days, and the BBC suddenly think this is the most pressing political story of the day. What do you think about that? I mean, the BBC have come under a lot of criticism lately over partisanship, over bias. They say, no, nothing to see here. There is no systemic bias in the BBC. And yet, turning on the television and radio today, we've been getting reports from someone who's in a playground 50 years ago, which can't be substantiated, and it's dominating the headlines. And when I sort of tried to look at whether or not the BBC accords the same treatments to other people, and I tried to make it a fair competition. I looked at scandals that have appeared in newspapers about other political leaders and went to see how the BBC may have covered it. 9 times out of 10, the BBC haven't reported on these things at all. Do you think we should be concerned about whether or not Nigel Farage sang inappropriate songs in his teens?
Well, I think anti-Semitism is always to be condemned, but I think the BBC should do a rather better job on dealing with modern-day anti-Semitism, not half-remembered or alleged anti-Semitism 50 years ago in a playground by boys who should have known better. And I think they should right their wrongs by showing that they are going to be properly independent, instead of always being on the side of the establishment and on the side of the wrong answer most normally. They've been wrong on all the major calls. They've been wrong on an independent Bank of England controlling inflation, which it didn't do, and they never cross-examined them as to why. They've been wrong on net zero, because most of the British net zero policies make the world's CO2 problem worse, not better, and in the meantime wreck our economy and shut down a lot of our industry. And they've been wrong on many of these sexual and race issues. They're not in contact with more than half the public that has very common sense and decent views on these things.
A lot of people listening might think, oh, Sir John, that sounds very much like the sort of tune that Reform UK like to play. Do you think that you are potentially in the wrong party? Would you consider lending your lengthy political expertise to a man who could well become the next Prime Minister?
No, I think I'm in the right political party. And Kemi Badenoch was extremely brave when she was recently elected as an MP, exposing a lot of this bad language and bias of the BBC about it all, and speaking up for the female point of view and speaking common sense on matters of ethnicity, because she was well qualified to do both, and she was a very brave voice against the establishment in those days. And I'm very pleased that the Shadow Cabinet has now adopted the only sensible economic policy in the run into this budget, which is that you have to start by cutting spending. The spending plans are just far too big. Too much of it is wasteful or unnecessary or undesirable. A lot of the net zero expenditure is very wasteful and undesirable. And if they would tackle the overspending, they wouldn't need to threaten us all with tax rises. Indeed, they could have some selective tax cuts of the kind you need to boost growth and get people back to work. The tax on jobs was ruinous. It drove unemployment up, and it's undermined the opportunities for many of our young people.
Sir John, thank you ever so much for coming on the programme. The brilliant Sir John Redwood. We all know him. We all love him. I just wonder, he and Nigel Farage definitely know each other. They've been part of the Brexit movement for a long time. I just wonder, with certain Conservatives, if the knock on the door came and it's like, look, we are still a new outfit. We're going to need some grey hair and political experience among our ranks. It looks like we're going to be the people who are in charge of the government. How many people would say, go on then? We're going to take a short break now. Well, someone who, when it comes to whether they would stay in the Conservative Party or not, has decided they're not going to, is our next guest. He's the head of campaigns for Popular Conservatism. We're going to be talking over... well, quite a ridiculous story, actually. It's a story from Brighton, so of course it's ridiculous, with a sort of woke flag, anti-racist flag scheme, which has now been banned for being racist. But Andrew himself has decided he's shipping out of the Conservative Party, so we can ask him about that as well. That's coming up after this break.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Now, it could only happen in Brighton, couldn't it? They've had this huge campaign to have some sort of woke flag stitched out of bits of ethnic fabric and the like. It's the Union flag, basically, or the Union Jack, as people often wrongly call it. It's only the Union Jack when it's flown on a ship, by the way, not to be a pedant. But there was this idea that an artist called Gil Mualim Doron, sorry if I've pronounced that wrong, Mr. Doron, was creating this new Union flag using textiles from across a wide range of ethnic communities to celebrate Britain's diversity. He's had successful displays of his woke flag in the Tate Modern, of course, the South Bank Centre, of course, and Liverpool Museum. And it was due to go on show at a library in Brighton. You would think that the Brightonians, never one to dislike a multicoloured flag, are they, down in them parts, would be absolutely chuffed at the idea of having this esteemed exhibition come their way. Alas, you would be wrong, because the council has decided to ban the exhibition after apparently minority groups expressed fear that displaying national flags could be taken out of their artistic context. The council has, of course, been branded a laughingstock by residents. A Stand Up to Racism spokesperson said, when a public library in a progressive city cannot host a flag celebrating diversity, we should all be concerned. Blimmin' heck, even Stand Up to Racism think this lot are too woke. Let's speak now to Andrew Allison, who is head of campaigns for popular conservatism. I mean, this just goes to show how banal, how regressive, how self-cannibalising and stupid the left wing are. Here is actually a project, pointless as it may be, to make our national flag out of bits and bobs of diverse stuff to make our national flag more inclusive. And apparently, oh, there it is on screen. Look at that. That's a feast for the eyes, isn't it? I wonder if you stare at it long enough, like a magic eye, I might see some sort of, I don't know, Christmas mirage appear out of that, of reindeers. Anyway, it's mad, isn't it, that this is supposed to be a sort of woke, inclusive thing, and even that's being called racist, for crying out loud.
It's probably, and good evening, Alex. It's probably the most bizarre story I've read this year. I couldn't quite believe what I was reading. That a flag that is supposed to say celebrate diversity and supposed to be not racist in any way, shape, or form, is because they don't have artistic control or something like that of the flags as deemed as racist. I mean, it is utterly mad, but probably only could ever happen in Brighton.
I mean, this is the thing. The whole concept of flags and racism is now becoming a theme, isn't it? Ever since the sort of Raise the Colours protest, which I was trying to explain to people. As far as I can tell, this is British people going, all right, you said the flag was racist. You said the flag triggers you. Ta-da! Here it is. Have a load of that. And, you know, these idiots, these morons who clearly have way too much time on their hands. And, I mean, we're going to get to a stage, aren't we, that we can't have any flag for anything unless it's the Palestinian one.
Well, this is the problem, isn't it, Alex? I mean, anyone can take offence at just about anything. And I was listening to you yesterday about this Christian preacher who was arrested because someone had reported him for quoting verses of the Bible and they didn't like it. Someone's going to be offended about just about anything. And if we go on leading our lives where we're frightened of just about anything that triggers us, then we won't ever do anything again, will we?
I mean, talking about being offended, I'm offended by the fact that the BBC are offended because they seem to, every time my eyes glance towards the screen which shows their rolling news, all I keep seeing every 5 seconds is this whole Nigel Farage said racist stuff as a kid's story, which is just... Is it just me who sort of thinks, A, you can't possibly substantiate that? There cannot be any empirical evidence to prop up these claims. Also, let's look at who's making those claims and whether they've got motivations. But also, do we care? You know, someone just wrote in earlier and said back in the 1970s, the BBC was still playing the black and white minstrel show. And now the BBC are going to town because in the 1970s, someone may or may not have said something politically incorrect as a kid.
It's quite incredible, isn't it? Because the only thing that I'm interested in, and I'm sure that the only thing that the voters are interested in, is what Nigel Farage believes in now and what he's saying now and the policies that Nigel Farage and Reform UK put forward now. They're not interested what a spotty 14-year-old Nigel Farage said nearly 50 years ago. And yet the media seem to be obsessed with this. ITV and BBC. I even saw a tweet earlier today from Ed Davey, who was...
Oh, he's never one to miss an opportunity to call something racist.
People were reminding him quite rightly that he may regard this particular subject as really too difficult for Nigel Farage to talk about, words to that effect. But what about Israel and the Horizon scandal when he was a minister? he doesn't want to talk about that either, does he?
Oh, mate,
and
this
that's
is
a
why...
damn sight more important than what Nigel Farage said 50 years ago.
This is why Ed Davies spent the entirety of the snap election on a body of water, so he didn't have to answer any questions, you know, be it a jet ski, a swimming pool, Lido doing some aqua aerobics. That man was always sort of surrounded by a moat, if you will.
Well, I think the Liberal Democrats thought that he could walk on water, but they were proved wrong on that.
Oh, do you know what? I live in somewhere now which is like hugely Lib Dem voting. And you can tell with these people, they actually just don't like politics. So they don't like Labour and they don't like the Conservatives. So they just vote Lib Dem automatically. I have no idea what the Lib Dems stand for. Does anybody? It's because they're so protected against the real world. That's why I lived there, quite frankly. I got fed up with the mean streets of London and went back to good old-fashioned Britain in the Shires. And what you realise is the communities there are so insulated from the sort of issues that people are facing in Sunderland and all the rest of it, that they vote Ed Davey. He is basically the absence of politics. And let's talk about a decision you've made, Andrew, because my understanding is you've written to Kemi Badenoch saying, do you know what? The time is up. I'm going to leave your party.
Well, yes, but that was basically about the tweet that was made by Kevin Hollenrake later on Sunday evening. I felt that she should have fired him for that, but instead the Conservative Party machine went into overdrive and defended Kevin Hollenrake. She defended it. They're trying to say that he was joking. But, I mean, no one can joke about the Nazis and what they did during the Second World War. And it was absolutely clear, although it was not explicit, but it was implicit, that he was basically trying to say that Nigel Farage and Reform UK are just a bunch of Nazis, a bunch of fascists. In all fairness, he actually tried to call me this morning. I didn't realise it was him. I was in the middle of doing something and the phone rang. I didn't recognise the number. I let it go into voicemail. But 5 minutes later, I received a text message from him saying that if I want to talk to him, I can, and emphasising again he was trying to just inject humour. You can't joke about things like the Nazis and the Holocaust and the crimes that they did then, and so therefore I felt no, I had to leave the Conservative Party, mainly because Kemi wouldn't take any action against him, and the party in general, the High Command, seemed to think that those sort of comments or jokes, or whatever you want to call it, are acceptable.
So are you going to stay politically homeless, or do you see yourself moving over to Reform?
Well, I knew you were going to ask me that question next, Alex. At the moment, I actually don't know. I'm absolutely undecided. I'm trying to take a bit of a breath, and I'll have a think about this probably over Christmas, and I'll make a decision next year. I think you'd be stupid. Anyone would be stupid to rule anything out. So, but you know, watch this space.
Andrew, it's always great catching up with you. Andrew Allison there, who is head of campaigns for Popular Conservatism. OK, we are going to take a short break now. By the way, keep your messages coming in. I haven't finished with this syntax concept, so I've got to read a few out. Actually, let's do a few now before we take a break. That would make more sense. I would put a syntax. I like the way that Johnny in Gloucester, who is not Johnny, my father, in Gloucester, because he has an H in his, so I know it's not him. But they've put syntax, S-Y-N-T-A-X, which is a play on words, which makes me think it could actually be my own father. I would put a syntax on every single politician that uses the word deliver and then never actually delivers. By the way, if you're a linguist, you'll understand why that is multiple levels of funny. It's just ridiculous that we pay road tax, yet roads are full of potholes and half the roads are taken up by bus lanes and cycling lanes, and we just have to wait in long queues. Well, that's an answer to a question I didn't ask, but I can't help but agree. Carry On Henry already had the best tax, sex enjoyment tax, weekly returns, and no one would admit to not enjoying it. But the returns could have some ups and downs, says John in Perth. There we go, we snuck that one in. It's a not quite post-watershed hour, but I liked it anyway. Great look today, says Mark from Knoll. Oh, you like the monochrome thing, do you? I know someone who has two. Yes, that's right, two mobility cars. Apparently one car is for general use and the other car is for dog walking. Make that make sense? What, are you saying someone's dog is disabled and needs a car of their own? What? How can you have a mobility car for dog walking? Or is it like a sort of extra slow little smart car that you just sort of attach the leash to the door handle and drive along at 10 miles per hour while dragging your sort of roadkill Jack Russell behind you? What an image. Jeremy in West Sussex says, I have a suggestion for a tax that would be popular and environmentally friendly. Put 1 pence on every item of junk mail. That would raise millions if it had the effect of reducing junk mail. Think of the reduction in waste paper and CO2, transporting it all about. What do you think? It sounds like a very West Sussex point of view, my friend. But no, I mean, we all hate junk. Do you know I don't get junk mail anymore? Do people get junk mail? I haven't had junk mail in ages. Ah, that's because I now live in a part of the country that is, like I said, it's sort of immune to the problems of the real world. Tax Starmer and Rachel, you know, the first woman chancellor. Every time they say working people and 22 billion black hole, there you go, sorted. Quids in, says Margaret in Birmingham. I'd tax anyone putting their Christmas tree up before December, says Stuart in East Sussex, otherwise known as the Grinch. I'm looking forward to Christmas trees. The world is full of doom and gloom, and I say get those decorations up early this year. And Alex, you said you wanted to laugh. Did you know... Oh, that's funny. It's not... OK. Did you know that diarrhoea is hereditary? It runs in your genes. Way! And on that note, because at least one person laughed, we're going to take a short break and see if anyone can do any better. If you want to tell me what you would tax, or I don't know if you've got a better one-liner joke than that, let's hear it. 03444991000 is the number to WhatsApp me or leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 8722 is the number to send me a text message. Write the word talk before you text. I'm back to go through tomorrow's papers today with John Lucas, the night news editor for The Sun.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello and welcome back to you, John Lucas, night news editor of The Sun. I feel like there should be a jingle for this segment, which is of night news. Dun, dun. You know the song I mean?
That'd be good, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to sing it, that'd be great.
I don't think anyone wants me to sing it, not even me. OK, so tell me, what is going to be leading the news in The Sun tomorrow?
Yeah, well, look, it's big news. We hope that we might be inching closer to peace in Ukraine. Ukraine has agreed in principle to this US brokered deal. It was a 28-point plan. The other day they've managed to bring it down to a 19-point plan. Lots of meetings going on. So we've had some Russian and US officials meeting in Abu Dhabi. At the same time, Ukrainian officials have been meeting other US officials in Geneva. Zelensky said he's willing to go to Washington this week to thrash out the rest of the details of this. We've sort of been here before. That is the downside to it. We've been here before. Russia, one of the big sticking points is Russia wants to
take land in this deal that it hasn't managed to conquer with military force, which is, you know, as peace deals go, it's not something that you're generally going to see, because they haven't been able to actually take the territory. The other thing is this deal does leave the door open to Ukraine joining NATO in the future,
right?
Which again is a red line.
Bound to be a Kremlin red line. Do we have much detail of what are the 19 points? Because we've been mooted. There's this new peace deal on the table, but no one seemed to know the sort of detail of it.
Yeah, no, we don't know all the details. I mean, that'll come out over the next few days as all the parties meet a bit more. But the other sort of element to this that we're going to do tomorrow is Labour have commissioned this defence plan by General Sir Richard Barrons, in which he is warning that Britain is only getting war ready at half the speed it needs to. So even in the best case scenario, if we were to have a hot conflict with Russia or any other country, our forces wouldn't actually be ready until 2035. He says we essentially don't have a viable air defence for modern warfare, and as part of this wargaming scenario, if we were to have a hot conflict, the NHS could be facing 600 casualties a day. That could be civilians, and obviously military forces would be coming back to the country for treatment. And it's a very real. It's not just pie in the sky.
Yeah.
You know, very serious people are warning about this, and the government just isn't acting quickly enough.
Do you know what? Don't you worry, Britain. You'll be pleased to know that I'm signing up as a reservist. It is true. I'm partway through my application. I've got very aptitude tests to do coming up, but I've decided I'm going to go and, well, you know, instead of talking the talk, let's walk the walk.
Yeah, that's
in
great.
A uniform. Let's see if they allow me. Let's talk now about David Lammy, because this is actually quite a massive story. It's one of those stories. It's actually, you know, coming out on budget day, oh, quelle surprise, because it really does deserve attention. We all know that we've got a huge backlog in the judicial system. We all know that that is not sustainable, that people just aren't being brought to justice at all, and the machine needs to be oiled in various ways. And of course, jury trials, you've got to appoint a jury, you've got to potentially cover costs. You then have a drawn-out process where they go into discussions and they might not agree. So why not just get rid of all that and have some woke judge unilaterally making the decision? Because this apparently is what David Lammy's going to do. And he went on record before saying he would not do this, because this is actually, you know, this is changing centuries of history of what is deemed to be a fair trial. And at a moment in time, surely, where loads of people think a lot of judges in the United Kingdom are far too leftist.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yes, 800 years of jury trials, the tradition we have in this country. Obviously, I mean, this comes from a leaked memo, so someone around Lammy's leaking this. Although it does sound like it went to a heck of a lot of people, so it's no surprise. But anyway, yeah, there's a 77,000 case backlog in the courts. Some Crown Court trials, people are waiting 4 years to get to trial, which is obviously ridiculous. There have been suggestions that you could have another sort of division of criminal justice which would speed things along a bit, but this is definitely a lot more radical than has been suggested before. And it's Brian Leveson, incidentally, who has come up with some of these ideas. Now, it would only be rape, murder, manslaughter, public interest cases would still have a jury trial. And we know that a lot of lower level cases anyway are tried in magistrates' court, where you just have a magistrate or a bench, so things like shoplifting. But it leaves a lot of stuff in between: burglaries, harassment, stalking, all these sorts of things that go on at Crown Court. You could potentially just have one bloke sitting there, or two or three blokes sitting there and as you say, you only have to look at some of the crazy cases we see in the immigration courts to know that people's politics and personal views do come into it, even if they're judges. And we know they do because they get overturned on appeal all the time.
Yeah, which is exactly why we need the jury service, because it sort of prevents, one guy from Leafy Hampstead standing there and going, oh, well, you've nicked a load of stuff from Argos, but don't worry, because you're a migrant, you've probably got a hard life, so you get off. You there with your mean words on Twitter, 2 years in prison. I mean, this is the problem, isn't it? It actually gives me the sort of dystopian flashbacks of the social media trials where all of a sudden, forget the judicial backlog, we can televise all these trials taking place with the Mr. Justice, whatever his name was, sending a load of people to prison for what, saying stuff?
Yeah, I mean, there must be other ways to deal with it. Lots of courts have been closed down, we know. There hasn't been great investment in the criminal justice system. Maybe that's a better approach than simply getting rid of 800 years of legal tradition.
I'm sure during COVID we were supposed to have Nightingale courts or something. It's funny, whenever there's a crisis, or don't sit on a park bench without a mask, we're going to set up a high-speed judicial system, or don't write things on Facebook. But when it's back in the real world, they've suddenly forgotten that they can pull that lever.
Yes, indeed. Yes, absolutely.
Now, how old are you, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I'm around about the sort of the 40-ish mark, or just around that.
So you're an eight-year-old adult then, essentially?
Yes, according to science.
According to science.
According to proper science.
Tell me about this story.
So scientists have looked at our brains, and they've figured out that adulthood only really starts aged 32. So up until then, you are a teenager, essentially, all the way through your 20s. So they did this using MRI scans, and it looks at the way fluid moves around your brain. I don't know, I'm not going to get into technical details of it, but I trust them with this. So you have 4 landmark stages in your life. It's 9, 32, so between 9 and 32 you're essentially a kid. And then you only really get old at 66.
Yay!
So if you're in that sort of 3-decade period, you're still young. Just don't worry about it. And then when you get to 83, you have a sort of serious decline. But I mean, if you get to 83, you've had a good long innings anyway, and hopefully a good life. But yeah, so this is a study, but proper scientific study. It's in the Journal of Nature Communications. They scanned nearly 4,000 people between childhood and 90 years old to come to this assessment. So it's just good news for all of us who, sometimes we're accused of not growing up and still being childish in our, around about the 40 mark.
Oh, mate, I'm about to turn 42 and I'm still a toddler in many
you're 42?
respects. About to, almost.
I wouldn't have guessed.
Why, thank you. This is the correct answer. This is exactly the response I wanted to hear. Boxing Day, by the way, if you want to send me a card up to the 17th floor.
Nice.
I know, no one else is going to. Everyone forgets day after Christmas. Worst day of the year to have a birthday. But there you go. I became an adult 10 years ago, so they say. I'm not sure it's true. I'm not sure it's true because this next story is really up my stralsa. Tell me about, what's the name? George the African grey.
George the African grey parrot. We discovered this parrot. He lives in a pub in... He lives in the Lord Nelson pub in Sutton, in South London, and
Lord Nelson, she writes it down.
Yeah, he's a bit of a lad. He loves drinking, swearing, and Millwall. So we're in the part of the world here. I don't know if everybody will know, but bang in the middle of London Bridge, we've got a fair few Millwall pubs around here.
Oh, do we?
Yeah. The King's. The King's Head is the Millwall pub.
Oh, that's a good pub.
It's also the favourite drinking hole I've heard of many of the chaps from the Times.
Oh, is it?
Which lots of people wouldn't know.
I quite like the George up the way. Have you ever been there? The Parliament Bar, which is one of the oldest bars. It used to be had various lives. It was one of the oldest places, and apparently Shakespeare used to go and perform his plays there back in the day.
And that's why a lot of us chaps from the Sun sometimes pop in there.
The erudite ones, the Times are in the Millwall pub, and the tabloid boys are down
thugs, aren't they?
In history. They are thugs.
But yeah, so and George the parrot. They give him shot glasses of Guinness, which he loves, and he can chant some of the Millwall chants. Apparently, they also have Chelsea fans in this pub, and it drives them mad. But they all love him. He does. He can make lots of sounds, and he also eats Wotsits. He lives in a cage on the bar. People give him fruit, And yeah, he's a real character.
I love him.
We've been down to
I
see
love
him.
a pub pet. It's a very British thing, actually,
Yeah.
isn't it? There's a brilliant pub somewhere. I think it's sort of Chiswick or Ealing or something, and they've got this cat which is the size of a leopard, this massive Norwegian forest cat who just sort of lies there as this sort of a tourist attraction on the bar. And there's also a pub going towards Holborn. There's a cat with a ruff.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Like a sort of it's where all the lawyers go and stuff, and he's got a ruff. And
They have in the Globe in Borough Market. There's a terrier who will walk up and down the bar.
Is there?
Yeah, which is weird because normally sometimes you have a pub cat that will do that. But
yeah.
Not a dog, but
pub pets all round. I love it. You can't get enough pub pets. Thank you ever so much, John, and maybe one day we'll go and find the pub pets of London together.
Yeah, good idea.
And celebrate becoming adults. Right, okay, we're going to take a short break now, but don't go anywhere, because after this I want to read some of your messages. I also want to talk to some of you. You've been a bit shy and retiring for my liking, so come on, step up to the plate. 03444 99 1000 is the number to call if you want to be patched through to the studio. Give a girl a bit of love. 87222 is the number if you'd like to send a text message. Write the word talk before you send your message. That way it doesn't ping pong around the building trying to find its home. No, it's going to feel very much loved and potentially read out here. 03444991000 is also the number to send a WhatsApp message, or you still have a chance to leave a voice note on WhatsApp. OK, going to be hearing a lot from you guys just after this.
Big news coming this December. Our talkTV app is moving to the Talk app. You can watch, catch up and listen to all your favourite shows and podcasts anytime, anywhere, all on the Talk app. From Monday, 1st of December, the talkTV app will no longer exist, so don't miss out. So head over to your App Store or Google Play and search Talk now.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there. One of my favourite messages that has been sent all evening is when I said, what would you tax if you were the Chancellor? I'd tax socialists. They love tax. Honestly, that is just beautiful. It should become a haiku or something. It is perfect in its simplicity. Neil has said if the farmers want to protest in London, they should display a Palestine flag. That way they'd probably get a police escort. Terry in Slough says, hi Alex, I'm 76. This is the most useless, incompetent government I have seen in my lifetime, and I've seen some terrible ones. I wouldn't trust this disastrous lot to run a raffle. Well, quite. How about taxing the whole of the cabinets for stupidity? Regards, Debbie from Surrey. The problem is they seem to be busted left, right and centre for not paying their taxes, isn't it? Oh, look, didn't pay the right amount of council tax, did ya? Oh, didn't seem to pay your stamp duty. Problem is with this lot in the cabinet, most of them probably don't pay half the taxes they should in the first place. Tim says, could you tell me when the Magna Carta was cancelled? It gives all the citizens the right to be tried by a jury of their peers. Maybe Mastermind Lammy hasn't heard of it. I wouldn't doubt that 1 second. And someone else has said jury nullification is a central pillar of our justice system. Surely this cannot happen without a jury. And Dean in Derby says, I would tax cycles and cyclists. Wouldn't that be delightful? Let's speak now to Adam, who is in Nottingham. Good evening, Adam.
Good evening. Yeah, you've been talking a lot about Nigel Farage and this absolutely ridiculous thing of dragging up something he said when he was a kid. And I only base stuff on my own experiences. And I can remember when I was back at school, it's 13 something, and you learnt the N word, and it was being thrown around, and it upset kids, and kids are absolute horrible. And they want to do that. They want to tease each other and get a rise out of you. And you say the horrible thing. I didn't even know what it meant. I never knew what it meant.
This is the thing. Teenagers are always pushing the limits. You say to a teenager, don't do something, and the likelihood is they will actually go and do it. And I don't know if you agree with me on this, but very often some of our greatest political leaders are very imperfect people. They aren't sort of do-gooder, forelock tuggers. We've always got to be nice. We better be pure as the driven snow. We better not offend anybody. Because if you've kind of got that, sort of really compliant, subservient attitude, you're probably not going to be very good at having one of the biggest jobs in the country, which is running it.
Absolutely not. I mean, I'm in two minds about reform, but it's better than all the rest. But I tell you something, it makes me more endeared to him knowing that he's fallible, knowing that he's lived a life exactly, like mine, or had that experience like mine. And I know for a fact I'm not a racist. I'm not anything. I don't even believe in that stuff anyway. But it's just absolutely insane that people would. I did horrible things, or we all did stupid things and horrible things when you're a kid. And the fact they're bringing this up now is absolutely. It just means they are absolutely grasping at straws with this guy. Which I'm not an expert on him, but it makes me like him more.
It's funny, isn't it? I remember when all the sort of right-on media with Georgia Maloney said she was a member of the Mussolini fan club, she was a fascist when she was younger, the most dangerous woman in Europe, pictures of her on the front pages of all the leftist newspapers and magazines as if she's going to come and, start World War III. Now they can't get enough of her. They're basically queuing up to be in the same photo as her. This stuff doesn't work. Adam, thank you ever so much for your call. Let's speak now to John, who is in East London. Good evening, John.
Hi, Alex.
Hiya.
Pleasure to speak. Yeah, Alex, I was in total agreement with you earlier when you said about using sort of like racism terms and all that, when really they've used that to hide behind why they allowed young girls to be attacked, and so how they're still using that, I don't know.
Right. So what I was basically saying, in case people weren't listening earlier, is this. Racism isn't a laughing matter, it's not funny, it should not be tolerated. I staunchly stand by that. But the problem is, everyone goes around calling everything racist now. Everyone's a racist. Oh, you fly your own national flag, you're a racist. You happen to not know what the most up-to-date rule is on which specific term you can use, whether it's dual heritage or diversity or BAME or minority or black or mixed race or coloured, or, you know, a lot of people just don't know what they're supposed to. You're a racist. The problem is this constant forcing everybody to walk on eggshells all the time for fear of being labelled a racist, which is a very severe accusation, is exactly the reason why rape gangs have been able to act with impunity. It's exactly why that poor little girl who was forced to wear a hijab by her father to school because she was being beaten up, no one said anything about it because they were worried about being called a racist. Creating this sort of scattergun approach where anybody at any time could be character assassinated by the R word, you're a racist, is actually creating a smokescreen where all sorts of nasty, nefarious, real-life, horrible crimes are taking place. John, thank you ever so much for your call. Hello, Mr.
Hello,
O'Sullivan.
Alex. So I don't mean to interrupt.
You've kind of come in looking all sort of calm and ready. What's
I'm
going
never
on?
calm,
They
but
put
I'm
you on the
always ready.
Xanax or
I'm always
something.
ready. Now, listen, we're going to have a look at the remember the Manchester Airport cop beaters? One of them's inside and hasn't been sentenced. The other one still walks free, the jury having not reached a verdict. What is going on? Why is it taking so long for justice to be served with those two brothers?
Are you going to get your mate Yakub on? It used to
Well,
represent
I don't
them.
think I'll get him on somehow or other. Also, you'll like this one. You'll love. This is for you especially.
Yeah.
At 8:30, I know you covered the story of my credit to the family, Sean O'Sullivan, the Christian street preacher, who has just been acquitted ludicrously. He was charged with hate speech for preaching the Christian word as a Muslim family walked past. He's been acquitted for that. Anyway, he's going to come on the show and tell his story.
Is he? Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Yeah, he's a Swindon guy, isn't he?
Have to stick together.
Yeah, exactly. I'm very pleased about that. Yeah. Before we sort of, you know, do the sort of seat exchange, what do you make of the BBC?